I am Dia, and I'm 17. I am very bright, but there are indelible marks that seem to be stigma to which I've tried to deal with. It has not been easy, but I tried my best to push through. When I was 12, I had an accident with a boiling water when my mother was cooking in the kitchen. I sustained injury on my right arm. My skin peeled as a result of the incident. It looked ugly, and I never like. Yeah, it was because of this reason that I covered it all the time at school. It was my decision not to disclose it with my friends' friends, and I maintained. There was this guy in my school. We do homework together, and when we play games, we make the team. He is a funny guy, fair and tall. On our last day at school, before vacation, a group of us agreed to go swim, and we chose a popular swimming pool not too far from our school. We were all excited, and off we went, but before our arrival, I was a bit moody, having remembered my scars since it must be uncovered and seen by everyone. On arrival, everyone jumped into the pool, but I was hiding myself to avoid what I knew. Finally, I joined my friends, and while I was swimming, I was searching for my friend Tim. But to my amazement, Tim was nowhere to be found. I kept swimming and searching until finally I saw him sitting at a corner, still putting on his navy blue jeans and white canvas. I took a pillow, covered my scar, and came out of the pool. Went straight to him and asked, "Why don't you swim with us? Especially me?" He answered and said he does not really like. After the swimming experience, we went home together. But while in the bus, I asked him why he didn't join us to swim because I felt there must be a reason for his unbalanced excuse. He then opened up to me and said he has a scar on his leg. That's his reason for not swimming since he always avoids exposing it. At this point, I told him about my scar too, which was similar to his own. The difference is that mine is on my hand, while his own is on the leg, and he was surprised. While we were having our chat in the bus, a lady sitting close heard a little about our conversation. She gave me a sign with one eye, which means, "You guys are intimate friends. Right on." I caught the sign and responded in a lady's way too, and Tim was not even aware of that. When it was time for me to alight from the bus, I pretended I never knew we were close because I raised a funny joke which got I and Tim laughing out loud. When Tim realized the bus had passed where I should stop, he called my attention, but I told him not to worry. At this juncture, Tim surprised me by alighting a bus stop before his bus stop. I alighted with him together. We were now between his bus stop and mine. He said he will walk me down to mine, and as we were moving, we were gisting. After a long walk, we were close to my bus stop. Then he looked into my eyes and said to me, "Take care of yourself." I said to him, "I want to walk you down too." And he laughed and said I should not worry, but I insisted. When we were walking down to his way, he said he has never been this happy in all his life. He started telling me a story of how a girl laughed him to scorn. He said it started when I was 5. I was good at climbing, be it tree, stick, chair, and anything climbable. Both of us laughed as we were still walking. On that fateful Sunday morning, my dad was still in his room, and my mother was in the bathroom pasting. I was doing my climbing from one chair to another in the sitting room. It was time for breakfast, and my mother was preparing the table. Suddenly, I threw up my brown teddy bear. In my attempt to catch it, I hit my body on the dining table. The collision was so hard that the hot water for coffee turned and every drop of it poured on my leg as I was at the top of my voice. My mouth was already bleeding by the time Mum arrived because I also hit my face on the table. I was immediately raised and taken to the hospital. As a little boy of 5, my skin was so soft that it did not take a couple of minutes for my skin to start peeling. The doctor said nurses that attended to me did their best. Later on, I started recovering, but by the time I was out of pain, my skin was already looking scary and messy. I remember my dad always cautioned me about climbing. Then my father took me out for shopping. And as we were shopping, a woman with her daughter of about 10 or 11 years were also shopping. I was putting on half pant with wine red polo. As we were shopping, the girl that came shopping with her mom saw me, looked at me, and as I looked at her too, smiling, suddenly she looked down and saw the scar on my leg and gave me a shocking sign. Next, she came a bit closer, and after looking at my leg, bursted in laughter. I couldn't hold it, but I felt so cold. As I talk, her picture and all she did are fresh in my memory. I couldn't but held Tim on his right hand and said to him, "It's okay. It's all in the past. Thank God the hot water didn't come close to your handsome face." Tim smiled at me in such a manner as one that wants to say something emotional. By the time I looked up, we were close to Tim's bus stop. He said he must walk me down to my bus stop, and it was fun walking to and fro that day because we were not going to see till school resumes, and it was a long vacation. Something dramatic happened, and I was speechless as Tim was telling me his story. I recalled an encounter I had at a shopping mall with a boy. I still can remember that I laughed at a boy after taking a close look at the scar on his leg. I couldn't help but to tell Tim that I had a confession to make. He was amazed at such word and could be the confession. He said I should speak up. I told him to look at me and he did. I said to him, "I'm that girl you had the encounter with at the mall." He looked at me with utmost amazement. He looked at me, and I couldn't hold it. The fire came so strong in me, and I hugged him, and he held me so tight. I felt like I was in heaven with vanilla ice cream and chocolate. I said to him, "I love you. I love you. I love you so much." He replied, "I love you too." Tim told me that he was going to tell his dad what happened today, and I said he should not, but he insisted. I said it's okay if it will make you happy. We exchanged our house addresses. I hugged him again and again, and we said bye to each other. After a few steps, I would turn, and immediately I would see him turn too, and we would wave at each other. We kept doing that until we could not see each other. The memories didn't allow me eat, let alone sleep in the night. Every image I saw on the television that night was like Tim's image. I was a little insane that night. Some funny thoughts began to flash on my mind that night as I was in bed. 3 weeks after this unforgettable experience, something awesome and tragic happened. I remember sitting and watching my favorite television program, Shirley Temple. Suddenly, our doorbell rang, and my mom went to open the door. Behold, it was first a tall man entering, followed by a handsome guy. Guess who? It was my own Tim. I could not believe my eyes. I jumped up line a mountain deer and rushed Tim. He was full of smiles and laughter. This time, I could not hug him, but my spirit, soul, and body were all wrapping him. His lips were so charming that I would have committed an offense if not for the presence of our parents. Even as our parents were exchanged pleasantries, honestly, I was tapping serious current from his hand. I felt like not leaving that hand. I wouldn't know what came over my parents that day because on a normal day, they would have told the children to enter the room as parents are having their own gists. I will not forgive my mother because she didn't say that. But who knows if she saw something because of the way I acting. Well, thank God for my parents because who knows what would have followed. When Tim and his dad left, I was full of thoughts. My happiness of seeing him and the thought of missing him were mixed together, leaving me in a state I couldn't explain. Little did I know that something strange was about happening. As they left, I joined my mother in house chores. When it was time to rest, my dad, as usual, tuned into the news channel. To our disbelief, there comes a breaking news of a ghastly moto accident that claimed all except one. As the name of the victims were being called, with my eyes full of shock, I saw Gregory Jackson, Tim's dad. As if the name mentioned was not enough to convince us, a short video clip showed, and behold, my Tim, before journalists narrating the tragic incident. All I could remember later was seeing my Tim on television because from what I was told, the moment I saw my Tim, I slumped and was revived at the hospital with the help of oxygen. My dad and my mom planned attending the funeral service without me to avoid further problems, but when they saw it wise to take me along, they had no option than to do so. At seeing me, my Tim came and gave me a deep hug. I was his consolation throughout the funeral. Thank God I saw my Tim.
Hello from Elena. I am 20 years old, and I'm from Italy, Lombardy to be precise. I was born on the 3rd day in the month of April. I'm the second child in a family of 4 children that consists of 3 males and 1 female, and yes, I'm the only female, surrounded with brothers that had my back each time I was in trouble. Although I stayed with my grandmother, they had their ways of being around me. I was told I lost my parents at an early age. My brothers went to stay with a family friend where they were really maltreated. But they had no choice than to stay with them because they had nowhere else to go. Even though they would come visiting, I and my grandmother once in a while, they tried not to make us feel sad for the maltreatment they were going through, so they keep happy faces each time. I can't remember the early stages of my infant life, as I have never heard nor asked about it from my parents because I never had the chance to. I went to stay with my grandmother immediately after they died. And I also don't have any proof of it because there is no piece of proof left to be proud of as a history of my infancy life. I have passion for writing. I was 12 when I started writing because I always wanted to be a great writer, like Victor Hugo, who wrote Les Miserables, or like Roman Roland, who wrote John Christopher. They have influenced millions of people through their books. I also wanted to be a great psychologist, like William James or Sigmund Freud, who could read people's mind. Of course, I am nowhere close to these people yet, but I aspire and aim to be like them someday. Back then in my teens, it was mostly silly rhymes and poems of random stories and thoughts, and sadly, a lot about my struggles with my brothers and myself that I wrote about, because the words kept coming and I kept writing. How glad I am that my teens are long gone. I was so depressed. Most times, I had to do some side jobs so myself and my grandmother could survive. We hardly eat 3 square meals, but we survived each passing day. I am a person who is very positive about every aspect of life. There are many things I like to do, to see, and to experience. I like to read, I like to write, I like to think. I like to talk. I like to listen. I like to see the sunrise in the morning. I like to look at the clouds in the sky with a blank mind. I like to do thought experiment when I cannot sleep in the middle of the night. I like flowers in the spring, rain in the summer, and snow in the winter. Sometimes grandmother will look at me and say, "You are going to be so great in life, and I can't wait to see you achieve your dreams." Those words gave me strength to keep fighting. So since childhood, I grew up with this best at everything attitude in me. I used to be the best scholar in class, active participant in every sphere. And when I was appreciated for this, confidence used to flow through me no matter what. However, as the teenage years hit me, I started to face mental bullying. Slowly, it started affecting me negatively, and as much as I resisted it, I was drawn more into it. Within a few years, my whole focus was shifted to fight this. I lost focus of my academics and my other skills, and the results started reflecting in my life. I was losing what I had. Even my grandmother noticed it. She wasn't happy about it, but she still encouraged me to not give up. She wasn't the type that will force you out of your own will or force you to talk when something goes wrong. She just gives you reason not to give up. But when my school grade results came out, I was suddenly into the reality of myself. The pride I used to see in everyone's eyes, my image of a confident girl, it was all gone, and it was hard for me to accept. Day by day, as the law says, I attracted it more. There was a time when I had lost all the belief in myself, and lost myself completely. I thought of, but on a second thought, I had to make my brothers and grandmother proud. Continuous failures kept coming, and screwed up friendships made it even worse. I had lost where to go in life, what to do with my career, and to whom I should seek for help. I knew if I had gone to my grandmother, she would just console me with her words of encouragement, and I was not ready to listen to the same words. Although those words have helped me, but it wasn't what I needed. In the process of me seeking for help, I met one of my teachers in school who called me to his office because he noticed my grades had gone down, and I had not been the way I used to be in class. He sat me down and asked me so many questions. Some of them I can't even remember. He gave me examples of people that were like me, and they ended up wasting their lives because they kept to themselves. His words pierced into my heart. I was stirred up to do better, not to allow myself to be mediocre. Just almost immediately after, I got my strength back. Then, the coronavirus came. I'm sure you have heard about stories where most people are infected with coronavirus. And as we all know, the coronavirus is a deadly disease, and it's the #1 talk of the town in all social media now. A lot of people have been infected with it currently, and I wasn't lucky. As many of us so, I got infected from who knows where or what, actually. It's shocking, right? Yes, I know. Even I haven't come to terms with it. Of all the people who had to be infected, it had to be me. Of all the hardship and circumstances I had been through, I still got an addition to it. Here I was searching for help so I can get back to the right track of my life. And when I finally found help, coronavirus came to damage it. It was on a sunny day. I noticed I've been coughing heavily, sneezing non-stop. I was scared I had tuberculosis because it was so intense. I still had a little cash with me from the last side job I went to do, so I went to the pharmacy to get drugs to stop the cough, but it kept on going for a week. Immediately, my grandmother noticed this symptom in me. She picked me up, and we drove straight to the hospital, and I tested to be coronavirus positive. My grandmother has been coughing for like 2 days now. Before we went to the hospital, but it wasn't intense, so I paid no attention to it. But unfortunately, the doctor also told my grandmother to diagnose herself, so she had to be sure if she had this disease or not. I was so scared because she had been coughing too, and I paid no attention to it. But unfortunately, my grandmother was also diagnosed of this same disease called coronavirus. I felt so bad. I had promised to give her a better life, but all I did was infect her with a disease that I'm not sure we will survive from. Immediately, we were admitted into the hospital so as not to spread the virus. We were both placed on the same treatment and medication. We were both in the same hospital room, and all my grandmother could do was to shed tears because she never expected myself and her to be a victim of this virus. I remembered when I was little, when she made sure I had food to eat, when she would encourage me with her consistent words. I felt like a failure. I was very unhappy. I was supposed to make her proud, but now, how I have failed. After 2 days in the hospital, a lot of patients were brought in and they'd been diagnosed of this same virus. The hospital was so full to the extent that there was no bed to accommodate a lot of people that were diagnosed of this virus. As the result of this, a nurse came in and told me she would be moving me away from the bed to the corridor, reason being that the new patient needs to be admitted immediately. I was pleading with her not to move me away from the bed, but during our conversation, my grandmother overheard us, and she told the nurse not to move me away from the bed. Instead, she will prefer if the nurse can move her instead of me. My grandmother loves me so much that she never prays that anything should happen to me. The nurse then took my grandmother away from the bed, and she was placed in the corridor. It was so painful, me looking at her lying down on the floor helpless. But there was nothing I could do to help the situation. After my grandmother was dropped at the corridor, not up to 2 days, she died. My grandmother died, and no one cares about her. I wanted to go with her. I felt guilty for infecting her with the virus. Why didn't it take me away instead of her? I wish I had magical powers to bring her back to life, but she was gone. Grandma was gone, never to return. She left me alone in this world. After the death of my grandmother, I still stayed some month in the hospital, lifeless and helpless. It was so difficult to survive. My brothers were scared to visit me because they didn't want to be infected. The doctors had advised them not to come close, else they might get infected as well. Even though they were in charge of the bills, they still didn't come close. At first, I was angry, but then I didn't want their case to be like that of Grandma, so I understood them. They were the only family I had left. On a faithful Monday morning, the clouds were still warm. The wind was blowing slowly, and my eyes were gazed at the sky beside the window, close to my sickbed. I was still in shock and sadness of Grandma's death, lost in thoughts. I heard the voice of the nurse assigned to me that morning. "The doctor is coming soon to check you." As she left, all I could think of was why the doctor wanted to check me. There's no hope left. I was going to die anyway. As he came in with a bright smile, he greeted me and told me I was responding to treatment because the virus had reduced in my system. I was so shocked. How that could be possible, I asked him. All he did was smile and left. In less than 2 weeks, I was diagnosed as being free of coronavirus. Shocking, right? I know, but I can't explain it either. I guess it's what you called a miracle. But I knew luck found me and was giving me a chance to fulfill my dreams. I have just been released from the hospital as a survived person of coronavirus. Just don't know what to do with my life. It's so desperate right now. I was scared to go to my brother's place to meet them, but then I had nowhere else to go, so I went to meet them. On getting there, I met just two of them. They were surprised to see me, but not happy. They told me of how my third brother also got infected of this same coronavirus and died. I was literally on the floor crying and screaming, "Why me?" I lost another family again. I couldn't bear it. They were able to console me, but they didn't want me to stay with them because they didn't want me to be maltreated as they were. I was hopeless once again. I didn't know what to do or where else to go to. Will I end up sleeping on the streets of Lombardy? I feel so lonely, and life hasn't been fair to me. Where have I gone wrong? What do I do now? Please comment on this video and help me.
Hi, I am Rhea. I am a very ambitious and hardworking young girl of 19. I am the second daughter of my parents. People around see me as a beauty diva, but I honestly do not care. We lived an average life since my father couldn't get enough earning from his job. As a college student of biology at Phoenix University, I have always been passionate about being a surgeon doctor, so I kept studying. I was so studious that I never had time for partying, clubbing, and making friends. Although I know that I had a lot of admirers, but I still don't give a damn. I remained focused on my course. I lived a stereotyped life in college, from the lecture room to the hostel, from the hostel to the library. However, I have one fault. I am an extremist, so you don't have to wonder why I am serious with my academics. I promised my dad to make him proud and tried to make good grades. My world came to a standstill just 24 hours to my first semester examination, as I was engrossingly studying biology, that I forgot that I have not eaten since morning and it was almost 4 p.m., and I suddenly slumped. The next place I saw myself was in a hospital bed. My father came, and the diagnosis proved that I had a hole in my heart that has accumulated badly, and the only solution that is beyond therapy is to have a heart transplant. So I was booked for a heart transplant. I wondered where on earth a donor can be gotten from. I felt devastated as I watched myself lying helplessly. Indeed, life dishes up so many: injury, illness, tragedies, abandonment. Though we may share replica experiences, yet every hurt differs. And no matter how many times our loved ones say, "We understand," they don't. You may even get pissed off at their words. It was not easy for me to bear this pain, as I was viciously knocked down by life. I was psychologically tripping and falling. I felt the impulse to rise and start moving. Oh, hell no. It's not possible. I was so weak. Agony descended on me. What shall become of my dreams? Nobody could cheer me up because I was living a friendless life. So my only succor is my family, my father and mother, and the doctors and nurses who kept speaking life into me. My parents started sourcing for funds to save my life. A lot of thoughts were already running through my brains. Where on earth will my dad get such amount of money? What will happen to me after now? It was quite challenging, but my dad determined to see that his only child lived. After 48 hours, The doctor told us that the only solution to the challenge is to keep checking if there would be instant accident cases that claim lives. In such cases, with the permission of the government, victims can be operated and the organs sold. Coincidentally, there was news of an accident that claimed 7 lives that same day. And from one of the victims, they got a heart for the transplant. It took hours to carry out the surgery, but at last it was successful. Everyone was happy as I gradually recovered with added beauty. But I started feeling different within myself. I lost interest for education. I hardly attend lectures, talk more of reading. People said I became rude and inhuman. And then my dress code automatically changed. I started disliking decent and corporate wears and preferred sexy and nude clothing. I started liking dancing. I got myself trained to be a strip dancer. Wherever there is a club, that's where you find me, no matter the time. Luckily enough, I got a job at a strip nightclub in town. I enjoyed my new job and entertained my customers well such that I was second to none in strip dancing. I was having a good time with the job and even started mingling with the manager. We became close and had fun severally. I got attracted to the manager the very first day I came to apply for the job, and the manager responded positively. On the night of Boîte de la Boîte, I rolled badly that my moves and rolls attracted Mr. Black, the manager of the strip club. I never knew he was crushing on me. For the very first times I was dancing, my fist lost control and I almost fell off the strip with my head bowed to the earth, and I suddenly felt a hand that gripped me. On lifting my head, behold, it was Mr. Black. He whispered to me, "I love you. You remind me of someone special." He carried me down from the stage as I walked into my room panting like a dog that lost a fight. Then I asked who it was I reminded him of. He told me that it was his love that works here in the strip club that died some months ago, and he feels the same thing for me. Even right now, it's as if he is seeing her. I got scared the more. "What was the date of the accident?" I inquired. 7th of February, 2006, he responded. He also told me that it was 7 persons that died and the hospital they were rushed to. I immediately left him there and went to the hospital where my surgery was carried out and made all the inquiries. The document of the transplant was shown to me, as well as the photocopied death certificate which Mr. Black gave me, and it was confirmed that it was Soya's heart that was transplanted to me. My goodness, I couldn't believe it. I dropped a note that explains my findings to him at the bar and went home weak and confused to do anything, but I have to start preparing for the night show. I never knew that Black was still in love for me, not minding what I do for a living. How I strip myself at nightclub was not his concern. While in my cubicle, my white towel tied around my waist after having a cool shower, as I was applying my body cream, I heard the sounding of someone opening my door. I felt it was my roommate, but it was not her. It was a tall, heavily built, and a cute guy standing with his legs crossed in front of my door. It was Mr. Black. I was dumbfounded. He calmly closed the door and made his way towards me. I was becoming nervous, and trust me, I have never been this nervous before a man since I became wild doing my strip dance business. However, I decided to overcome this nervousness as I stood up. He held me on my slippery arms. There was this feeling that moved within my arteries and veins that got me shaking. "This is not me!" Immediately, he whispered into my ears, "You cannot run away from me. Even if you run, you cannot hide. If you hide, there's only one place you can hide, and that is in here," pointing to his heart. As his passionate eyes were already gazing into my eyes, I wondered where this is heading. As I turned round and slowly bending my head just to avoid his charming looks, he raised my head gently, lifting my jaw. As I gazed into his eyes this second time, I became more tensed. He still fixed his brown eyes looking into mine with uttermost devotion and commitment. I was ready to strip because I thought he wanted a quick fun as usual so that I can attend to other customers. Instead, he took the cream that was still in my hands, offering to help me finish the application as he gently applied the cream. Myriads of thought kept flowing in me. I was engrossed with the movement of his hands, and I felt this passionate bliss and heat that is rising within me as I got more intensified. It was truly a mixed feeling. Mr. Black put his arm around my waist, lifting me on the sofa, and knelt before me. Surprisingly, he never did anything but kept looking into my eyes. "Rhea, you are indeed the bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, and I promise to make you happy and fulfill all your dreams. I thank God that my lost love was brought back to me. Please, will you marry me?" As he kisses in a golden ring into my mouth. I said yes to him. Yeah, I accepted to marry him because since I met him, I have full joy. Immediately, he carried me up in ecstasy with the tears in his eyes. "I will make you the happiest woman on earth," he screamed. We were very happy, laughing without fear in words on the cushion as the stars light up the sky like a treasure in an island. Our hearts skip in ecstasy as they feel the waves' current whispering secrets as old as creation to our souls, telling folklores of a magnetic love so far, yet near to immortals. And as the cool morning breeze rushes to our feet like children at play in a sonata moonlight. Those affirmative words spiced with a soothing touch, a healer of sorrows and pains in his boredom, moment when the past is erased and a new beginning born to fertilize the soul and purge every detail of heartbreak away. As we lay on the floor of the dunes, I heard the splashing of the waters creating ripples as the birds sing lullaby songs to celebrate a new beginning. A moment carved so deep into the sands of time, a moment that defines who we are, and moment that sticks forever. Never-ending episodes that only the morning dews could melt away into forever. I have come to love a heart as soft as yours, Rhea, my love. This is reality and dream come true. It serenades both body and soul. Black said to me as my strip dance job ended that night with Black by my side.
I made a mistake just to have a friend. Sometimes it is difficult to tell a story where you have made a mistake, especially if you have been warned many times in the past. Anyway, I've decided to be courageous and tell my experience to help other people who might be in the same situation. I am 14 years old, and it is very difficult to fit into a new school, especially when you are a girl. Everyone thinks they know who you are by just seeing your clothes or the things you have, or any superficial detail. This is why the first friendship is the most important, to get away from stereotypes and become a person of flesh and blood with their own opinions and tastes. That's how I met this guy, Jeff, who was at the same classes as me. At first, he seemed to be as shy as I was, but we quickly started talking about deeper issues and felt that the time in school was not enough. We exchanged phone numbers, and it made me very happy to know that I was finally starting to fit into this new place. One Sunday, after talking for hours and hours, he told me that he wanted a photo to show him what I was doing. It did not seem bad, even amused me, this new activity in our conversation. This is how I began to send photos in which I appeared washing my teeth, brushing hair, washing dishes, doing homework. Until one day, more exact, one night, he asked me to send him a picture of my night clothes. I didn't know if that could be good or bad, And although I was a little doubtful, I decided I didn't care and I sent the photo. He said that he loved my shorts, that I had very nice legs, and that probably I had a nice butt too. I felt at first flattered, but then I found very uncomfortable his attitude and changed the subject. The next day, almost at bedtime, he asked for another picture of my nightclothes, but this time I had a very short dress and I did not want to. He got annoyed and told me he wouldn't talk to me anymore because I didn't want to play with him, and I was so scared. He was my first friend in this new school and I didn't want to lose him. The next day, almost at bedtime, he asked for another picture of my nightclothes, but this time I had a very short dress and I did not want to. He got annoyed and told me he wouldn't talk to me anymore because I didn't want to play with him, and I was so scared. He was my first friend in this new school and I didn't want to lose him. So I sent him that photo, and after those, many more photos, some even without any clothes. Suddenly, I wasn't feeling well talking to him. I felt like I was doing something wrong. And the worst of it was when my mom caught me taking one of those pictures with no clothes on. I thought I'd die of shame. But unlike what I thought, she didn't yell at me, just asked me what was going on, and crying, I told her everything. It was very difficult, but I took courage and told her that a guy was forcing me to send him photos, and that I agreed, but that I didn't want to do it anymore, and that if it happened again, I would have to tell her immediately. Thank you so much for Mom, for everything. Just like I was, I'm sure there are a lot of people in my own situation who want to tell their story. I invite you to leave your story in the comments so others can also feel understood.
My Mom and I. Please, real story animated. Make my story animated. Hi, I'm Tiffany, and I'm almost 17, and I'm fun to be with, like adventures, and in my melancholic nature, I love taking risks. But I don't tolerate it when I'm underrated or intimidated. I love my parents, honestly. The open secret remains that their incompatibility is nothing good to write home about, and that's what kills my joy most times. Dad has always complained about Mom's infidelity in their marriage. The last straw that broke the camel's back was on one fateful day I was right in my room while I believed that Mom had already gone to bed. And for all we know, Dad was gone for a business trip in Australia, and we expected his arrival in 2 days' time. Suddenly, I began to hear a manly voice in Mom's room. Could Dad have come back by this time? Oh no! I called Dad's line and his autoresponder responded that he was in a meeting. That means Dad isn't in town. Then who is this man that I'm hearing his voice in Mom's room? Then, in my suspense mood, I drew nearer to Mom's door to hear this voice better, and lo, it was the black bug guy I normally see Mom drop off whenever she came to pick me up from school. Oh, really? I guess she decided to bring this big guy, Mr. Frank, home tonight, because the dad isn't at home. I can hear the romantic voices and actions, unlike Dad, who isn't perfectly romantic. I started peeping through the door handle. I could not believe my eyes. As cool as the evening was, Mom's body was so inviting to Mr. Frank that he couldn't hold his emotions anymore. And then he made a move towards her. Suddenly, they were already floating on the cloud, gazing into each other's eyes. Frank gently pulls her so close to his daring heart. hoping they do not part ways even for a second. As Mom wrapped in his arms, imagining them taking a journey into time together, breathing passionate words of love into his ears. Like a bolt from the blues, his fingertips stroke softly throughout her hair with such divine affection and care. Frank's body creating heat of passion, building within, emitting vibes that erupt deep down her gentle soul, and wrap her in his arms, imagining eternity. As he felt the smoothness of her skin, his mind fantasized as their bodies interlocked in the sea of emotions, creating much energy and passion, heating up deep down their souls. The response was too real for Mom to believe this is happening to him. I can see that from Mom's body language. She softly said to him, "Frankie, come and be lost within me forever. I feel myself being a part of you from the onset. That I dragged you into the car has been all about Frank inside my mind, and the seconds fleets into minutes, minutes ticking into hours, and the hours clicking into eternity. It's just a fantasy with such a wonderful design as we both float downstream to where we could be." He kissed her so passionately, holding out dreams of daring chances as I feel like flying on angel's wings with you. Frank whispered to her succulent ears, just as the cool morning breeze gathers where shadows will be at sunrise. He held her hands with lips locked in unison until they stroll into the path of scented bliss, till the dream ends in the terrestrial sky before the cock crows. Oh my goodness, I realize that I've actually been stooping all night in front of Mom's door, following every bit of their moves. I was lucky enough. It was a Saturday morning, and I dozed back to my room because my sleep was actually deprived of me by the two lovebirds. With the look of things, Mom seems to feel very much safe and cared for with Mr. Frank. Then I began to understand what the bone of contention may be in my parents' soured relationship. Mom really needed a man to care for her and treat her like a queen she is, and not business conference today, business meeting tomorrow. That fateful Saturday morning, I was woken up by the shouts and voices of grievances and anger. And I heard my dad's voice very clear, roaring like a lion, just as usual whenever he is scolding at Mom. I was getting confused more this time. Did I mistake Dad for Mr. Frank? Just as usual, I crept out of my room. This time, Mom's room was not locked. It was wide open. No, it can't be. I have never seen Mom and Dad in such atmosphere of emotions and bond before. When I came close to her room, I saw him. It was Dad. I greeted both, and of course, I didn't expect them to respond to my greetings anyway. They continued in exchanging words. Then I knew there is a fire on the mountain because Dad came back with an early morning flight. He said on getting to Australia, the meeting was held in a jiffy, and he had to make his way back to the state. Then I heard Mom screaming, "Go, go, go! I'm tired and fed up with all these. It's over between us." That was how Mom and Dad got separated. Then, according to the law, I live with my mom till date, believing that someday a miracle will happen and both of them will come together again. However, I love my parents. I just needed more. More care, more attention, more love, and more togetherness. Sincerely, when I see other kids together with their parents go on vacations, shopping, sports, and all that, I feel jealous. During my 16th birthday, I wished I could get all I wanted in my parents. The atmosphere was smiling at me as I blow out the candlesticks, standing in front of a gigantic cake with my both parents standing beside me. One on the left and one on the right, and then they both handed over something wrapped in a gift bag. What could it be? I thought aloud. Wow, it's a phone! I mean, 2 different lovely phones. What a birthday! Then the music was rolled, and I danced and danced in my Cinderella pink gown. Unfortunately, it was a dream. How I wish this is not a mere dream, but a reality. But I believe in dreams becoming reality. I believe it will come to pass one day. Oh yes, it is my birthday. How I wish it would be celebrated in a grand style. It is funny because when I turned 16, my mom promised to buy me a phone. I kept reminding her about that until one day a strange event that I couldn't understand. Something happened after turning me around a couple of times, and for my 16th birthday, my dad wanted to buy me a phone, but my mom never wanted to see me with him or allow him to do anything for me. Note that my mom is this type of independent woman. She insisted that she wants to buy it for me, and I was happy because finally I'm going to have my own phone. On my birthday, Mom did not throw any party around for me. All I got was an early morning pat on my back and whispering, "Happy birthday, my little angel. I promise I'm going to get your phone today." Wow! That sounds interesting, and trust me, I kept reminding her that day. "Mom, my phone!" On that day, I waited till evening. The waiting was too long. My mom keeps saying a bit later, but suddenly she asked me to dress up, of which I did, although she was acting as someone who was waiting for somebody until finally she got the call from a colleague which she was waiting for, and we head to shopping. I enjoy driving with Mom, so we went in her car. We passed the store where we should stop and buy the phone. "Mom, that's the shop," I said in excitement. Rather, she apologized that she needed to visit her colleague at the castle. As a child, there are things I don't debate with Mom. We arrive at the colleague's house, and it was a big house. I loved it. He had 3 cars and 2 dogs. Mom knows that I like dogs, so she said to me, "Tiffany, you play with the dogs, and I will get back pretty quick." "Yes, Mom," I responded. I started playing with Japs and Jade. As I was engrossed in the fun, after some time another man with a big black car entered the house, and then comes another one, and after 5 minutes, another one. I was wondering what is going on. My mom came to meet this colleague, and here are 3 more visitors in there, and I'm not seeing my mom coming out. So I decided to go inside, and upon approach, no one was in the living room. It was silence except the weird noise coming from far away, and it sounded like someone is clapping. One door was opened in one of the rooms, but all of the rooms were dark or less lighted, and I came closer and called Mom. No one answered, and then I came even closer, and the clapping sound started increasing. Clap, 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 and sometimes even faster, clap, clap, clap. And then I heard someone saying, "Yeah," and again, clap, clap, clap. And then I heard the voice of Mom saying, "Yeah, yeah, ah, you are good." Then she increased the speed of the exclamation. "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah! Oh, thank you, yeah, yeah, and finally, yes! Let's do it," I thought. This is a fight, or what's going on? At this moment, I called loudly, "Mom, are you okay?" Everything stopped, and they all get out saying, "Yes, let's do it. Congratulations." But then I asked Mom, what was that clapping noise? And all that she said was, I pitched them an idea for a startup business, and yes, they agreed to fund the project. But then one thing that got me thinking was the physical appearance of the 3 men. They were sweating profusely, looking like men that just engaged on a physical combat, sapped of all their energy with this post-ejaculation, their minds numbed down, tired, and walking slowly, gulping down some drink. Immediately we went to the store, but while we were going, I asked her what were those weird noises, and she said it was nothing serious. They were all excited. And yes, I know she was excited because when she got out from that room, she was a bit reddish in her face somehow, and her voice was cracky, because she really shouted so much. My mom also told me not to discuss what happened with anyone for any reason. I knew she was warning me about this because of my dad. He calls me every 2 days to know what's happening around Mom, and she also told me that this need to be kept secret forever. Forever? Why is she holding this event so tight? For me, I see no big deal in it. Oh, but I will adhere to her instructions. With my sense of curiosity, I also asked her, why are all her colleagues men? There is no other female amongst them except you. She responded that they couldn't make it that day, but would come in the next meeting. I'm glad that finally my mom is happy, and she's going to make her dream come true. And I've got a new phone. But what was weird is that my mom never started that business, and now we are almost 1 year from there. This also means that my phone is 1 year old too. But I hope she will buy me a new one when I turn 17 next week. What do you guys think? What should I do so my mom will buy me a new phone? Please, like this video if you think it was not a business consultation. And leave a comment if you think it was something else going on.
My brain tumor story. My name is Brandon, and I'm from Australia. Most of my life as a teen, I was very skinny, the eat anything and not gain weight kind of skinny, and suffered from really extreme headaches to the point where I would get home and close the blinds and lay on the couch kind of headaches. I had them for about 5 years straight, and I had seen maybe 4 different doctors, and none of them helped me, but instead gave me painkillers and sent me home. I was now 18 and weighed 48 kilograms, or roughly 108 pounds, and still having severe headaches, so I went to see the new doctor in town, as it was a small town. We got new doctors sometimes. He had suggested maybe getting a CT scan, which scared the S out of my mom, but I really didn't know what that meant or what to expect. So we fly to the city, which is an 18-hour drive or 1-ish hour flight. We got the CT scan, effing loud machine. When we met with the doctor, he said that I had a growth in my brain, which made my mom start to cry. And I kind of just sat and really didn't say anything. And the doctor started making phone calls to surgeon, which upset my mom even more. Fast forward maybe 2 weeks. It was no longer referred to as a growth, but after another CT, they said the type of tumor was a non-cancerous one, which was amazing news. Probably the best news we had. But it was a pituitary gland brain tumor, which wasn't good. The pituitary gland controls a lot of hormones and a lot of other important things in the body. So I'm getting ready to have surgery, and I'm not really nervous, more kind of excited to get it out, but of course, things could go wrong. The pituitary gland is also attached to the optic nerve, which is connected to my eyes. So it turned out I had lost part of my eyesight over the past few years, but it was so slow, I didn't actually notice. So the old way they would do the surgery is they would crack open the skull and do it that way. But they had a new way of doing the surgery, which is to go through the nasal cavity, up to the skull, drill a hole through the skull, remove the tumor, and then would take a skin graft of some tissue and cartilage from inside the nose and would make a wall to cover up the hole. And because of the new way they do this surgery, they have a higher chance of removing all of the tumor and not having to go back and remove more. There was always a chance because of where mine was that obviously I could receive brain damage or go blind or, worst case, die. When I woke up, I was so effing high on morphine. I was seeing triple everything because my optic nerve had been stretched from the tumor, and I had tubes everywhere, but I could see my parents next to me and some doctors. Anyway, I pass out. A week goes by after coming in and out of my high morphine state, and I get moved to a ward block with my own room, which is like first class compared to the ICU. I sleep and watch TV for another week with my triple vision, which was horrible, but eventually it started to subside. My vision came back, but my peripherals never came back, which was in 2015, and I still haven't gotten it back to this day. But I didn't suffer any brain damage. I did have really bad damage to my pituitary gland, which could be fixed with meds that I still take and probably will for the rest of my life. I'm all good now. I take meds, but I'm healthy. I gained a bunch of weight, so I wasn't very skinny anymore, and I didn't have any more headaches, which was a weird time in my life because I had a lot of anxiety and depression for a few years. But I eventually got to a point where I wasn't so sad, but still had a lot of anxiety every time I got a headache or something didn't feel right. But I'm getting better at dealing with it. This is the first time I ever told anyone about it, but I'm bored, so here it is. I hope you liked it.
My experience with an internet crusader. I apologize in advance if I look like a crybaby myself here on Reddit. I just can't find any other place where I can unleash my anger. And no, I am not looking and asking for sympathy. So my story begins in a random Facebook group. I was invited to it by an internet friend. To be specific, the group was dedicated to trolling and starting flame wars, and I joined to spectate on the idiocracy that is going on there. When I saw a meme, a dog meme, I was extremely outraged when it was created in an extremely out of context and normie manner. I called a friend who was also in the group and pointed out the monstrosity of a meme. He too was outraged by it, so we tried to correct the OP of the meme and told him the meme is out of context and cringeworthy. Instead of the OP accepting correction, he went out on a tantrum, started to call us stupid and canophilic for liking a dog meme. We argued for an hour or so with weak responses from the OP, throwing elementary level of insults to us, such as stupid or dumb, etc. When the thread of replies ends, I thought it was all over and went back on Facebook like a normie I ever am and continued browsing in the said platform. Couple of minutes later, when I came to see what's up with the group, I was extremely shocked when I saw the OP of the dog meme made a post highlighting me and my friend for being canophilic, looking for sympathy, and said that we should fuck some dogs. It was a compilation of 4 screenshots antagonizing us and not showing how he argued to us. The sole purpose of it was to gather attention and to find an ally. He did not find one, though. At this point, I don't know if I should feel funny or enraged. I responded and called the OP a crybaby, and he responded that we should just commit bestiality somewhere else. The argument, once again, are between me and my friend against the OP of the post. It lasted more than hours, not until the OP made a bad slip. He said that he does not care on 4chan and would rather use Omegle for socialization. I laughed at him and said that I shall screenshot what he just said so I could show how much of a normie he is. He is not familiar with 4chan, by the way, and he responded that screenshotting is a form of being an attention seeker and a fame whore. At this point, he just contradicted himself and called him out a hypocrite and said I shall show the whole group how much of a hypocrite he is. As soon as the post was published, he immediately responded and tried to control the damage, and once again, hurling elementary level of insults towards me. By that time, I was AFK, and my friend was dealing with him, and to be honest, when I read the thread, he no longer makes sense and are illogical at his statements. When I arrived, I called him out once again a hypocrite.
My life so far.
And told
I grew up
him
in a
his
family of
opinion
5.
no longer counts
I was
for
the
being
middle
a
child.
hypocrite.
I was
And
never
said
loved
he
by
should
either of my
just
parents.
Suck his own.
Neither the one
He
contracted
didn't
out to Iraq,
respond that
nor the
night,
one raising me
and
at
I thought it
home.
was over.
This was just
The
a
next
biased
day I woke
conclusion
up
of mine,
and
resulting
checked
from
my
confrontations and
and I
conversations
saw
with the
him
both of
arguing
them.
against us
I was
during
raised
our
in a
sleep.
Lutheran family,
He
not that
replied
it
at this
matters.
time span of
My life has never
11
really had
p.m. to
anything to
1
do
a.m.
with what lies above.
I once again
My
responded
best
and
friend, since
insulted
I
him
remember,
for
was
being
raised in a
no
crack
life
house.
and taunted that
Also
he
not that it
probably
matters,
doesn't have
since
any
no outside
friends,
individuals had that
for
much
he
of an
just
effect on my life.
invests his time
Until then.
and sleep.
I went to
just
private
argue
schools,
with a random
funded by my
person
hardworking
who
parents,
just
until
wants
I
to
decided I
correct his
wanted to
use of a
switch over to
meme.
public high school at that
At
level
this
of
point,
education.
he no longer
Up
makes
until high
sense,
school, I was always
started to
obedient
be
and never raised
delusional,
any
and
red
claims
flags with
he
my
won the
parents.
argument.
Mostly my mother,
didn't.
since she was the sole
My
parental
friends and
figure
I
in my life.
concluded that he cannot
Father was
be
always
talked
deployed
to
or
in his
contracted
senses,
out to a foreign
and
country.
decided to ignore him
Once
at
high
this
school hit,
point.
I was the
Me
typical
and my
loser
friend
at the
also
start.
decided to block
Since
him
I didn't know
because
much of the
he just
teenager life
won't shut
considering
up.
my upbringings in the
Never
private
ever
schools.
in my life I blocked
I had known
someone
nothing
in
aside
social
from
media
Bible banging
over
and
just an
the seasonal
argument,
soccer
but I was
games.
extremely
From my
frustrated
fairly
at this
tall for my
point,
age and quite
and left me
stocky,
with
my
no
brain led
option.
me to joining the
By the
football
time
team,
I'm
where I
writing
learned
this,
many
he
valuable
is now
lessons of
just
teen puberty,
ranting on the
which
group,
are in no need to be
stating
mentioned.
that the system is unfair.
I went on to find a liking to running the
Was it
distance
really
races,
necessary
1
to
and 2
speak
mile,
in English
in track
in
and
an
field that year of
argument?
high school,
English
where I
is
then
our
decided that
secondary
next year
language,
I would join the
and also I
cross-country team instead of the
apologized if I
football
had
team.
a bad grammar.
I found to like my slimmer,
And says
handsome
that we
body
live
that came
in
with
a
being on the
democratic
cross-country
country
team,
and
and decided
shouldn't
to
be
continue the
dictated
trend
what
by
to
joining
do.
the swim team.
I
This
couldn't
trend of
deduct
handsome
if
body
he's
forming led
either
females to me.
ignorant,
As females were a fairly
narcissistic,
new discovery to
plain
me,
stupid,
I found it quite
or
interesting.
all of it combined.
And so, the first and
all of
possibly the
this
only love
was
of my
just
life
because
came
of
along.
us wanting to
It would be a
explain
lie to say that I
context
don't
of a
remember every
meme.
single encounter I
I
ever had
admit
with her.
that I may
She simply
be harsh
astounded
by
me
calling
with
him
every
retarded
confrontation I
and
had.
cringe,
I first saw her in
but
the
I'm
hallway,
just
very typical of a
frustrated
first love from high school.
that he cannot just
She was wearing a
accept
beautiful white
correction
cardigan,
and
blue
is
jeans that
plain
were so tight to
apathetic
complement her
regarding the
oh so
matter.
beautiful tight bottom,
Thank you for
her hair
listening,
straightened to the lower
and I
part of
will
her
end
back,
my story
and to top
here.
it off, the white trash sneakers indicating her trailer park livelihood. For whatever reason, I couldn't pass up my first sight of this beauty. My first passerby action on her went simply like this. "What is your name?" Followed by the answer of April. And she continued on her journey to whatever class she was scheduled for. My heart damn near exploded asking that question, never being so nervous for anything up to that point in my life. As every classical high school love novel goes, I pursued my interest in her, being as beautiful as I thought she was. I didn't say a word to April for months to follow. I only passed her in the hallway, nervously thinking of what I should say. One day came where I decided to ask her to attend a school play with me, and by God, it somehow worked. April said, "Yes, I will attend the school play with you." It was something lame like Robin Hood. I had no intentions of giving the play my attention. I had all eyes, 2 of them, on her. April and I, mostly April, had a splendid time at the play. So much that she decided to join the high school actor and actress group, whatever it was named. Regardless, April and I soon became that ordinary boyfriend-girlfriend you see at school every day, kissing at the locker, walking one another to class. April and I had many memorable events that I would love to share, but I don't have the patience to share. It all seemed to end in an instance, and high school was over. Fun was forever gone, never to appear in my mind again or ever happen again. As soon as high school was over, I proposed to April. She said yes. We had a white trash wedding at the courthouse with only our best friends in attendance. Soon thereafter, parting ways to go to separate colleges. In a few explainable events, my parents were soon both led to suicide. I then found never to be the answer. With my somewhat financial stability gone, I turned to joining the military. I joined, went to the military's basic training, and was then sent off to Germany without leave. Upon my arrival in Germany, I instantly called my lovely wife to tell her of my oh-so-wonderful experiences in basic training and others up to my arrival in Germany. She sounded so effing heartbroken while talking to me. As I had previously told her that it didn't matter where I went, I wanted her to finish out her degree prior to reuniting with me. Soon enough came, as the summer season does. She and my only sibling were to come and visit me where I was stationed. They were to come on a plane June 3rd and stay until the 24th of the same month. Early on the morning of June 3rd, my wife April and my sister Denise were on the way to the airport. A drunk driver crossed over the median, killing both my only living family and my beloved wife. Here I am, on the second Christmas, without a family to belong, finally bringing my story to the public.
Mom. There's one in every high school, an activity that everyone does for months on end, a fad everyone talks about, and if you aren't doing it, you don't get to participate in the conversation. I'm not talking about drugs or sex, I'm talking about scaring each other. For months in my high school, all anyone could talk about was the haunted houses they visited over the weekends. Jeff floated up the stairs. You could hear the woman crying out for her children. I called bullshit on all of their stories. Even the ones people clearly thought they experienced, figuring it was faulty wiring or old houses settling. I wasn't too interested in their stupidity, but little did I know I was about to experience things for myself, unwillingly. I'm from a very small town in the upper Midwest. My childhood home was literally in the middle of nowhere. Our closest neighbor was about a mile away. The home I grew up in until I was 14 was a rental. Then my parents bought some land and moved a huge old Victorian farmhouse onto it. The house hadn't been occupied in several years, probably decades. The last person who owned it wanted it off his property so the cows could roam free on the land. I still don't know when the house was built, but the original basement had a sign that it was 1909 was the year they installed the furnace, so sometime before that. After the house was moved, there were some repairs that needed to be done before we could move in. It was months before we were able to put anything into it. The first night we actually got to stay there was when I realized my family was not the only ones living in it. My parents picked me up from a school function late on a Saturday. The new house was kind of on the way to the old house, so when my dad turned on the road to go to the new house, I asked, "Where are we going?" To which my dad just smiled. I kindly reminded him that I had the clothes on my back and nothing else to say at the new house. We took a detour back to the old house, grabbing the essentials: toothbrush, pajamas, books, posters. We headed back to the new house. I spent the remainder of my evening putting up the posters I had saved from numerous magazines of cute boys and even cuter animals. I hadn't put them up in the old house, not wanting to rip them down to put in the new house. I listened to music and set up my room for a while before going to bed. Before I go any further, I need to give you a layout of sorts of this house. There are 4 levels: basement, main floor, upstairs, attic. The basement is basically a large living area with the laundry area, no bedrooms down there. The main level is kitchen, dining room, fancy living room, small bathroom. Upper level is 4 bedrooms with a second full bathroom. Attic is a big open space. My parents gave me the option to have my bedroom in the attic or have the master bedroom on the second floor since I would be moving out in a few years. I chose the actual bedroom because I want the closet. The attic never creeped me out. I seriously considered taking it as my room, but I'm a closet girl. What could I say? When you walk up the stairs to the left is my sister's room and my room because they are both the biggest. On the right is a smaller spare bedroom, my brother's room, and the bathroom between the 2 rooms. The hallway is very wide, and at the end of the hallway is a door to the upper level of the porch. When we first moved in, there was no porch yet, so the door led to a long drop onto a rocky driveway. The master bedroom is huge, almost a perfect square. Since I had not been able to set up my room that day, my sister and her friend set it up for me. They put my dresser by the door, the desk by the window, and the bed on the opposite side of the room from the door. They did a pretty good job. I just had to personalize it, so I turned on some music and shut my door so anyone trying to sleep wouldn't hear. My brother's room is right across the wide hall from mine. His bed was right next to his bedroom door, and his door was cracked open just a bit. By the time I went to bed, everyone else in the house was sleeping. I was just falling asleep in my new bed at the new house when I woken by a whisper. "Mom, Mom." Like when you're little and you wake up in the middle of the night to find you wet the bed or thrown up all over yourself, so you go get your mom and whisper right next to her ear. That's what I heard. I opened my eyes to see nothing. I had cracked open my bedroom door just a tiny bit to allow the hall light to seep in. just in case I woke up and needed to use the bathroom without having to turn on the lights. My closet door was also open about 3 inches. There was no one there who could have whispered. Confused, I fell back asleep thinking it was probably my brother who woke up and, being 7 in the new house for the first time, was disoriented about what was going on. I didn't say anything to anyone at first, but after I thought more about it, there was no possible way I could have heard my brother whisper from that far away. I couldn't stop thinking about the strange whisper and who it could have been. Also, I'd like to remind you, I now occupy the master bedroom where my parents of the previous family most likely slept. Finally, I told my mom. To my surprise, she didn't dismiss me or tell me I was hearing things or that the house was probably settling. She paused just a second, most likely trying to decide if I was mature enough to handle what she was about to tell me, and said, "I've heard it too."
Think running from the police is scary? Try swimming. It was summer break in 2010. Me and my friend Aaron were spending the day at the lake and stopped in to eat at a small restaurant close to the beach where we were going to. Aaron gets my attention and points at 2 really hot petite girls wearing short cutoff shorts and tank tops ordering food. They look wild and fun. We kept glancing over at them and then decided to get the balls to go talk to them when we finished eating. We asked if it was cool to sit next to them and they said, "Go right ahead." Everything we say, they laugh at, and they seem interested in us. I mostly locked eyes with the brunette, Brianna. She was shy and was giving me the "I want you" look, while the blonde, Chelsea, was more into Aaron. They were 16 and 17, just like me and Aaron. They invite us to go cliff jumping with them, and we respond with, "Hell yeah." We pile into my Civic, and the first thing one of them says from the back seat is, "Do you all smoke weed?" I say, "Maybe, why do you ask?" "Because your car smells like a pot factory, dude. Do you have any?" I tell them I have 1 joint and a roach. They giggle, and Chelsea says, "Stop by my grandma's house up the road and I'll grab my party supplies before we go." So I drove them there. A few minutes later, they come out with a big beach bag wearing the same outfit but with their shorts unbuttoned, exposing their bikini bottoms and having their hair fixed more. "Gosh darn," says Aaron to me. We agreed we were in for a fun time, and I slipped 3 condoms from my glove compartment to my right shoe. We got vodka, Pepsi, some more weed, and an extra something for us. My brother hooks me up when I want. We park at the beach and follow them to the spot. Had to walk about a 1/4 mile down the road and sneak through people's yards and head down the trail in the woods, enjoying the view of their backsides bounce with each step. After seeing no trespassing signs, I ask them what happens if we get caught, and they tell us a lot of teens come down here to party. They just try and keep them out. We reach the cliff spot, and it's very secluded. The girls strip down to their bikinis, and I wonder how the heck I'm supposed to hide my erection in my swimming trunks. They tell us before we get effed up that we have to check for rocks in the water so we don't end up dead. We followed them down the cliff and grabbed a really long branch to help them check. As long as we jumped about 6 feet out, we were safe from the cliff drop. As soon as they reach the top, they both jump without telling us, and Aaron looks down and says, "F no." They climb back up and laugh at us and tell us they'll show us their tees if we jump. They raise their bikini tops, and we jump in with our jaws dropped. The wind sounds like a tornado, and then I see pitch black when I hit the water. I swim up towards the sunlight and gasp for air. They woot for us and jump down to join us. Chelsea swims to Aaron, and Brianna swims to me. We splash each other and climb back up to the top. Brianna smacks my backside and tells me to climb faster, and I let her in front of me so I could smack hers and mock her. We reach the top and decide to break out the good stuff. Chelsea rolls up a joint while Aaron lights up ours, and Brianna passes me the cotton candy vodka after she takes a swig. Me and Aaron sat impressed watching the girls chief on the roach until it burnt their fingers. We talk and laugh, and Chelsea pulls a small baggie out of her cigarette pack and asks if we've ever done coke. We lie and say a few times, and they snort the first lines off her makeup mirror and pass it to Aaron first. I take my first snort nervous as heck. A rush of awesomeness pours through my head like a dam being opened to fill an empty river. Like I just scratched off the numbers to a winning lottery ticket. They grab our arms and make us get up and make us run with them to jump again. This time, the fear was gone, and it was a pure adrenaline rush. The girls whisper to each other on the climb back up, and they tell us we're doing belly button shots. So we slurp shots from their pierced belly buttons, and they did ours in a much more sexual way with a slow lick. After joint number 2 and another coke bump, one thing led to another, and Brianna was riding me like a rodeo bull standing waist deep in the water below the cliff. I didn't even say, "Let me grab a condom," after she wrapped her legs around me and was dry humping me with her tongue in my mouth. With the orange light from the sunset glowing on her beautiful face, it was on. After we finished, Chelsea asked if we were okay down there, laughing at us as we climbed back up. Aaron was pulling up his shorts, catching his breath with a smile like I'd never seen on his face before. We started passing the bottle again, and the sound of a CB radio echoed through the woods. I look over and see a flashlight and panic. We hide everything, and a sheriff and another officer walks up the path to us. "You kids having a good time? We got some noise complaint from the folks who own this property." Aaron says we will leave, sir, and he walks closer to us. Are you smoking a little pot? I look at the others, frozen, as I was going to say, "No, sir." He grins and says, "What are y'all's names?" Chelsea asks if we're in trouble, and he tells us that we're trespassing on private property and asks to check her bag. We all look at each other and blurt out, "Run!" and we all run and jump down to the water. I rose up to the surface and made sure they all followed me and started swimming like an Olympic swimmer towards the other side of the lake. "Stop, stop, stop, we will find you." He starts shining his flashlight at the water, and we go under every time it shines on us. We make it to the other side and start climbing up the muddy bank, sinking knee-deep with each step. We lay on the shore, catching our breath after the 2 football field-length swim. Chelsea tells us she left her wallet and phone in my car with the rest of ours. Thank God. We look across the top of the cliff at the flashlights and get up and start running through the woods barefoot. We crouch down by a fallen tree and catch our breath again. Talking about how we are from the cocaine and weed in her bag they are looking through right now, we decided to start swimming towards the parking lot along the shoreline. After about 30 minutes of swimming, we see a boat coming towards us with a spotlight and swim to a huge fallen tree in the shallow water to hide. They slow down and shine the light everywhere. I hold Brianna and calm her down from crying and wait for it to pass. When it does, we slowly move down the shore with just our heads out of the water. After over an hour, we swim across the lake again and sneak up the hill to the parking lot. Thank God there were other cars parked there from the campsite next to the beach, or my car would be quite obvious. I get my keys from the gas tank door and drive the girls home. I tell Brianna my number and she puts it in her phone, and Chelsea did the same for Aaron. We were stupid for not getting their numbers because they never called or texted us. We didn't even ask for their last names and spent hours looking for them on Facebook. We didn't find them. I pulled out and would have expected Brianna to call me if she were pregnant. We drove to her grandma's house a couple weeks later, and no one was home, so we decided to leave them alone. To this day, me and Aaron have laughs about that night when our wives aren't around.
My biggest secret I have to tell you. Hi. All you need to know about me is that I'm currently almost 14 and a female. One day I was with my older sister at a festival, and we went to a psychic palm reader. And my sister went first, and according to hers, it went very well, and she had a great reading. Now, when I went in, the lady touched my hands and jolted back. I was scared, but she seemed terrified of what she had just noticed. She started chanting out the number 14 over and over, and then she started trying to get some words out of it. I was scared and trying to help her. She said, and I quote, "Dark, something dark, window 14, him 14, no, dark, ZMSJ, beach, name." I was shaking her to make her come out of it, and when she did, she sprung straight into action, writing down her phone number and address of her shop, and told me to come there before my 14th birthday, so she could help. For a while, I just thought she was insane, and it was a scam. Then I decided to call her, and the phone line said that it was disconnected. So I looked up her shop, and it is not a thing. It's like she completely disappeared off the face of the earth. That's when I looked back at what she said, and I remembered she said window, and immediately I thought of one thing. When I was about 11 years old, I had a thing happen to my window when I was in my room that I remember my dad telling me to shut my window and lock it because it started to get cold outside, and I did as he said. But later that night, I woke up to being really cold. I looked over in my window, and it has been unlocked and lifted just slightly, but nothing else happened that night. I shut the window, locked it, and I woke up in the morning. It was still locked. And then, my 12th birthday, the same thing happened, but the window was just a little bit more open. That happened twice that night, before I woke up in the next morning. But then, My 13th birthday happened. I had remembered that my window opens on my birthday sometimes, which I thought was just some weird coincidence. So that night, I had a couple of friends over, and we and my parents all watched a movie outside the living room. But in the middle of watching a movie, we heard a loud crack come from my room. Immediately, my dad ran into there to see what happened, and he just walked in and said, "What the heck?" I followed him in there. When I looked at the window, I was a little scared to see that there had been a large crack in the middle of the top part of my window. And the window was completely open, and the screen was popped out, and it had fallen onto the ground outside. We checked everywhere that night, inside the house and outside. There was no sign of forced entry. No one had been there. The window just cracked open, and the screen had popped out. And now, to hear that the palm reader said something about my being aware of being 14, I was so scared. I mean, how could she have known that? The scary part was the fact that she was scared of me. But just this experience isn't why I decided to write this. It was because I went to the fair a few days ago, and I went to a tarot card reader with my older sister again, and she heard everything my tarot card reader said. That I would be going somewhere soon. I didn't know, but it wasn't really my decision, and that something very dark would happen to me. And she said that it would happen very soon. My birthday is also very soon. I was immediately scared of what that could have meant, but she also said that I would meet someone, a boy. He would make my life better. He would take me somewhere that I would feel free. But she did say that I would never fall in love with him until I really saw who he was. She said that he would be a cocky and full of himself and mean and just overall not a good person. But then I would see the real him and fall in love even though no one would even know about it. Which didn't make any sense to me. The night after I got back, in this dream I was running through the woods. And I was happy. I was running through the woods completely happy, and someone was there running with me. Even though I couldn't see them, I didn't see who it was. And after I had run for a while, I saw a beach that I recognized. I don't know where from, and I ran to the beach, and sat next to me was a rock, and engraved on that rock was the name Zeta, which for some reason I knew was the first name in the initials of ZMSJ, which were the initials of the thing the palm reader had said. Then that's when I woke up. I had a dream the next night where I could tell that I was younger. And I was in a small beach house on a small deserted island, not much bigger than the house itself. And I walked up to a mirror and looked at myself. I looked just like me, but with no memory of even being me. I'll admit, I looked a little more muscular and a little more roughed up. But then I got angry at something for some reason. And when I looked back at myself, my soft green eyes turned ice blue for just a second, and then I woke up. But after that dream, I'm scared to sleep tonight, and also my birthday is coming up in less than a month, and I don't know what to expect. So there you go. My story, if literally anyone has read this far. I just needed to put it out there, somewhere, because I'm scared.
Hopeless. The alarm rang. 6:30 a.m. He turned it off and looked up at the ceiling. Am I living or surviving, he thought. After all, working 12 hours a day and going to college on the remaining time is not much of a life. I managed to get up after some time. He checked the time on his phone. 6:53. He's going to be late again. His boss will complain about him. This is a bad day after all, maybe the worst of the year, he talks to himself as he gets ready to leave without any emotion. He manages to get out of the house eventually. His house is 4 minutes from the bus stop. Time is around 7:20. He's not running because the bus goes around 7:28 at that stop. Just when I'm getting to the street, the bus goes by. It's too far to make it running. It's hopeless anyway. He's starting to think he's going to get busted. He's starting to think about it. He starts thinking about why he does this, why he cares. He works at a crappy job that barely pays the bills anyway. His boss is the devil in person. The company buys the workers for $3 an hour and sells them for $15 an hour. He knows it. His position has access to such reports. Every time he remembers that the boss's son is his coworker and he receives better wages than him and doesn't do anything, he gets even more demotivated. He looks at his hand. He looks at his hands and thinks, I'm only here for her. If not for her, I would have left this planet already. He looks around. The bus stop got crowded without him noticing. He looks to the left, and the bus is coming. 7:44. His shift starts at 8 o'clock, and he's only taking the first bus. There's 2 more to go after this one. The bus stops, he gets in. Bus is crowded. The rest of the people get in too. The bus feels like a tuna can. He observes the surroundings. There are people talking and laughing, people on the phone texting. Everyone seems so happy. Even the bus is at least 1 double maximum capacity. He sneaks his hand into his backpack. It's a hard task since he can barely move his arms. He grabs his headphones, plugs them in. Life gets 2% better. He does not hear the useless talking now. He's isolated. The bus arrives at the terminal. He rushes towards the next one. Just as before, another tuna can. It's midwinter. He left home with 2 coats. However, the amount of people produces extreme amounts of human heat. He's sweating already. He takes off the coats as he walks onto the bus. It's 8:03 already, and he's far from work. He's gotten to a point where he doesn't care anymore. Today is a bad day after all, just like yesterday. Time goes by. The bus leaves the terminal at 8:10. He is 10 minutes late already. The bus leaves only to stop a couple of meters ahead. Traffic. Intense traffic. It's peak hour. The city's grown insanely in population in the last 10 years. No roads were planned. Average speed is 20 kilometers an hour. His bus needs to cross the city to get to the other terminal. He feels like a gasoline doll. The bus starts and stops every 50 meters. His body waves left and right. This goes for about 30 minutes when he finally makes it to the other terminal. 8:40 now. He goes to where the last bus stops, looks at the board for the bus schedule. Last one left 8:35. Next one is 9:15 a.m. He's not mad, not sad. He does not feel anything at all. He feels empty, with zero motivation and will. He sits and waits, watching people go by. There he is, an empty human being watching other empty human beings rushing towards their work just as he is. Maybe I shouldn't complain that much, is the thought that revolves around his mind. He just snaps out of his thoughts, gets a piece of paper and a pen, and then starts drawing the terminal structure. He starts with the pillars, big black metal bars, then proceeds to the ceiling, metal bars installed in some kind of web shape. There are iron bars everywhere. He draws the signs. His bus arrives. He checks the time and it's 9:13. He hops inside the bus and gets a seat. This is the only bus that does not feel like a pressure cooker. He gives a small smile and remembers that he is hungry. Maybe that's why he made so many analogies with food. The bus starts and leaves the terminal. He's almost to hell.
Elliot. So it's been a while since I've been able to continue my story. Sorry. If you're seeing this part for the first time, you should probably go back and watch Mom and The Silhouette because this might not make any sense if you don't. If you had watched them both, you are aware of the child haunting the home I grew up in. He's been spotted and heard. Now I'd like to tell you about a little research my mom did after I told her about the creepy whisper I heard the first night we stayed here. I mentioned my parents moved the house onto some land they purchased. The previous owner was an elderly man who ended up in hospice care, unable to carry on a conversation for too long. When my mom went to visit him, she realized she was not going to get very far by talking to him. He couldn't even remember who she was. No biggie, there are records and death certificates, right? Well, sort of. She ended up finding a small cemetery near the location the house was originally standing. It was a small family one, overgrown and hard to find, but there was a grave that was marked Elliot. The marker said the child died at 6. That seemed about right. A 6-year-old would behave the way our ghost was behaving, but why had Elliot died? In the early 1900s, kids died in their sleep because of numerous things that doctors back then didn't even know about. Simple diseases we're now vaccinated for were terminal back then. Sad, I know. Not completely satisfied with her findings, my mom headed to the library to see what else she could find. Records weren't kept as well as they are today back then, but she did find something. There was a small obituary on a child named Elliot who was said to be about 4 years old. Okay, now what are the chances of a child around the same age, with the same name, dying around the same time on the same property? I think someone messed up on the age or year Elliot died. Either way, Elliot didn't go where they were supposed to go. Not knowing if Elliot is a boy or girl, I have a feeling he's a boy, so from here on, I will call him a he. My mother had to be content with her search for the time being. There are now no living relatives to ask, so we have to rely on records even though there may not be totally accurate. It's a bummer. I'm curious about this child. Why is he still here? What does he need? How can we help him? I have no idea. Not that I didn't try. After that first night of hearing him whisper, I kept the closet door closed, not wanting him to wake me up again. I spent a few evenings in my closet on a beanbag chair trying to talk to him and getting no response. I had some luck with the Ouija board at a friend's birthday party once. I suppose you like to hear that story, and since it's somewhat relevant, here, I'll tell you. My best friend from childhood had lost her grandmother to a heart attack very suddenly when we were in 4th grade. As a 4th grader, those things aren't understood fully like they are when you're older. It really hit her a few years later when she finally realized what had happened, and she got super bummed she hadn't been able to say goodbye. That's when one of us suggested a spirit board. What's the worst that could happen? In our case, her grandma can visit us, and that's exactly what happened. Throughout the night, I had been constantly pulling my hair behind my ear when my grown-out bangs got in my face. Typical 13-year-old, but I wasn't able to push them out of my face since my fingers were glued to the planchette where we were summoning the spirit. I was looking down at the board waiting for words to be spelled out when my hair was gently scooped out of my face and placed behind my ear, much like a grandmother would do for her granddaughter. After what seemed like several minutes, I looked at my friend who was crying. We all immediately took our fingers off the board to console her. Admittedly, a little freaked out, my friend said she was able to say goodbye to her grandma because she had appeared in the corner and smiled at her. She was the only one who saw her, but I told her she had put my hair back behind my ear for me. She had been a wonderful lady, and it wouldn't have been out of the ordinary for her to do that for me. That was before my encounter with Elliot. If my only other spiritual experience had been a less pleasant one, I may have been more apprehensive about the whisper. And since it had been a successful one, I decided to have some friends over and try it myself. We got nothing. Not even a glimmer. Maybe it's because he wasn't related to any of us, or he was just hiding or shy. We will never know. I didn't hear him again while I lived there. That doesn't mean he didn't announce his presence. But that's another story for another day. Keep creepin', peeps. The Silhouette. If you've watched Mom, great. If you haven't, I highly recommend watching it before this to have a better understanding of the situation. All of the events I'm about to describe all happened. For real. To me and my family. It's okay if you don't believe it. I honestly wouldn't either if I was hearing it. I never believed any of the stories from my friends that had experiences. They all seemed like bullshit. I'm still skeptical when I hear some stories. They seem a little too far-fetched or exaggerated for entertainment. Not mine. These are 100% true accounts of what happened. Now, I don't know how the ghost world works. Maybe they're in another dimension. Maybe they could think they're still living. Maybe they could see or sense us all the time, or maybe just at certain times. Our ghost wasn't always around, but he sure made his presence known as soon as there was activity in the house. It hadn't been occupied in decades, so maybe this little kid ghost had been alone for so long, and now all of a sudden there are people around again and he's trying so hard to get our attention. It makes me a little sad to think about it. At 14, you're pretty susceptible to everything around you. Friends, family, movies, and TV. As my mom was studying the look on my face, trying to decide if I should know the whole story, I'm sure these thoughts went through her mind. Does she want to scare the shit out of me, or should she just leave it alone and let me figure things out for myself? She chose option A. I also think she was relieved someone else had experienced something, so she wasn't alone and thought she was just hearing strange voices. She had been under a lot of stress to get the house ready for her family to live in, staying up well into the night at the house, got up to get us ready for school, still had a job, and took at least 2 hours out of every day to do some sort of cardio. She was superwoman. No wonder she may have thought she was just hearing things. Lack of sleep alone will do that to a person. In the winter, my mom rode her stationary bike in the living room after we all went to school. It was loud and obnoxious, so she had to turn on the TV up to a ridiculous volume to be able to hear it over the bike. This was why she preferred to be at home alone when she rode it, so she didn't disrupt everyone else in the house. This was when my mom heard the whisper, "Mom, Mom." She heard it over the loud bike and the loud TV. She paused everything to listen. Completely alone in the house and knowing she was, it was quite a shock. She didn't hear it again, so she kept riding. This is what she told me after I told her I had heard it. Then she said there was more. Over the winter was when she would go to work on the house. Winter in the Midwest means it's dark by 5 p.m. We're used to it, no biggie. So one night, my mom, exhausted, goes to leave the new house to go home to bed. She's driving away from the house down the driveway when she notices she left the upstairs hall light on. She stops the car to go back in and turn it off when she notices something strange. There's someone in the window up there. It appears to be the silhouette of a small child's head and fingers peeking out through the window in the door, as if the child isn't quite tall enough, so they're standing on their tiptoes, gripping the frame to see what's outside. My mom didn't go back in to turn off the light. That was the first sighting. The second was a couple months before we moved into the new house. My parents met with some friends at a bar. They happened to run into the electrician who worked on the house before we moved into it. He had quite the story for them. If my parents were working on the house, it was open and unlocked. You could get from the basement to the attic, no problem. When my parents weren't there, but crews were working on it, they only had access to the basement. The electrician was making a few changes and checks one evening, making sure all was working properly. He had been in and out of the basement, looking at lights and whatnot. He was outside making sure the yard light was going to come on once it got dark enough, and happened to look up at the house and see the silhouette of a child in an upstairs bedroom. He was there alone with no crew members or their children and didn't even have access to the main level, let alone the second floor. He was clearly shaken up by it and was relieved when my mom said she had also seen a similar silhouette in the window of the door at the end of the hall. He said it wasn't in the hall window, it was in the bedroom to the right. My bedroom.
She got pregnant, but not from me. It was 2011 when me and my ex-wife, at the time girlfriend, decided to come to a different country temporarily, mostly to have an international experience, to learn languages, cultures, etc. We spent part of 2011 and most of 2012 studying languages and working, until we had to go back to our home country due to a member of the family passing away. Also at that time, we got married, but just on paper. We didn't have any parties or ceremonies since we didn't have any money to spare. Studying abroad is very expensive. During the time we spent back home, we took several steps towards building a couple's life or a family, such as refurbishing my old apartment, buying furniture. We even received several gifts from friends because they were so excited that we decided to stay. At least, that's what I thought. Rebuilding the apartment was a saga by itself. In order to be able to provide, I created from scratch a real estate agency with my mom. We worked really hard and I was working a lot, which is a good thing. Because of that, I was able to finish the apartment, bought the ex a car, and bought myself a motorcycle. We had good friends and good people around us. Besides some minor things, I was living the life. On a note here that I almost forgot, her mom, my ex-mother-in-law, helped us with the apartment, as she was also excited for us. She paid for all the cabinets and all the paint jobs. This will be important later. It was mid-2013 when she started to complain about our home country and our current life. I couldn't understand it. From my point of view, everything was great. We had a great life and a great future. But that wasn't enough for her. She wanted to go back to the country and city that we visited as students in temporary residence. At first, I refused. I had a vision, a glimpse of the future. My business was doing great, and we had our family and friends around. She wanted more. She wasn't satisfied with all that, even though she was also becoming very successful in her line of work. So she gave me an ultimatum. We either emigrate as a couple, or she would do it alone. Of course, I gave up on everything I had, packed up my stuff, and emigrated with her. Of course, it's not that simple to emigrate. Her and I were both law bachelors. Our diplomas weren't accepted for immigration. So one of us had to come as a student and the other as a worker. So we made an arrangement. I took all the money I had and paid for the travel and first semester costs, as for first expenses, furniture, etc. She transferred her car to her mom's name so she could sell it and send us the money to pay for school. She would work and I would study full-time. She was doing exactly what I did for her while we were back in our home country. I was working and covering most of the expenses, and she was training and studying. But this time, I was studying. she was covering most of the expenses. But I was also helping, as I rented my apartment and still had some revenue from the agency. One of the first things we did after arriving was finding a place to live. We put some furniture in and opened a joint bank account. I'd like to take the time to also explain that I wasn't just naive. I was also very, very young at the time. She was just a half year older than I was. We found an apartment almost immediately, as we had friends living in the same building. We became door-to-door neighbors. It was great. Our friends were also a couple, and from the same country that we were from, so naturally we spent a lot of time together. The first 2 or 3 months were nice. I was studying, she was working, I was enjoying my studies. We were already talking about the future, such as next steps on the immigration process, about next steps in our life, having kids and such. I was adamant on having kids only after the whole immigration process was done, as we would be able to afford it, and our future in this country was uncertain. She agreed. During that time, we would throw some LAN parties as we were both gamers. I'd cook, we'd drink and play games. It was great. Most of our friends were gamers too, as we both used to work on a game testing company back in 2012, and she was still working the industry to that day. She invited a couple of coworkers for one of those parties. They seemed to be nice people. I even gave one of my winter jackets to one of her friends, who we'll call Dick, short for Richard, of course. Winter here is pretty intense, and Dick didn't have any winter clothes, so I gave him the spare jacket I had. From time to time, we would go out with her coworkers, all couples, except for Dick. I was never comfortable with him. I never liked him, but I would tolerate him as he was part of her group of friends. She would always complain about stuff he did or said. At this point, I started to see the signs. I started to become depressed as the distance between us grew bigger each day. I tried to fight for our marriage, but it seemed like she didn't care. The only thing that I could think about was all the bits, pieces, and situations we had to endure to get to where we were. I thought about our families, our friends, all the gifts and wishes that we received, all the good deeds from people that helped us. Why would she throw this away? My depression grew bigger. I became super focused on my studies and on my crafts. I was alone most of the time as my thoughts ate me alive. I tried everything at this point, and I was becoming exhausted. One day, she comes home after work and goes for a walk with our neighbor's wife. I knew it was coming. She broke up with me when she got back. I was never a guy that would easily cry, but I cried like a baby that day. When I was a bit calmer, I called my parents. That made me cry even more because I missed them so much. I went to bed crying, couldn't sleep, and ended up crying throughout the whole night. The next morning, I had a panic attack during class. I thought I was having a heart attack. I couldn't breathe. My vision was blurry. I could barely walk. I went to the infirmary, and there wasn't anyone there. I really thought that I was going to die that day. I laid down on the couch there and passed out. I woke up to the nurse assessing me, and I got the assurance that I was physically fine. I went home that day and stayed there, typed the divorce documents, signed it, and just stayed there, doing nothing, just thinking. That day was the very last time that I saw my ex. A few days passed by, maybe 3 or 4, and I woke up to a weird dream that I had. During my dream, my neighbor's wife was telling me that my ex was expecting a baby girl. I had another panic attack. During that same day, I found out that she was already official with Dick. A friend in common texted me the details since they both deleted and blocked me from social media. She never admitted to cheating on me to anyone, but she was already pregnant at that time, and it wasn't mine. That same day, I got a call from the bank saying that my ex signed the papers to close the account and that I needed to go there to sign it too. The bank account was empty. She even had the audacity of texting me to ask for money for rent and utilities. Besides the $60 I had in my wallet, that was all the money I had left. I was livid and desperate. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, my parents were able to send me a couple $100s, and that's what I used to move out. I offered her to buy me out of the apartment, meaning that she would buy my half of the furniture, and she got offended. We never talked again, as I was livid. I changed my phone number and deleted and blocked all means of communication with her. I was able to move out, to the worst place I ever lived in, with all my furniture using the money that my parents sent. But I have to admit, I was eating just once a day because I didn't have the money to do anything else, and I was way too ashamed of my naivete and situation to ask for more help. During that month, I noticed the number of friends I had on my social media was decreasing. I asked around and found out that for each group of friends that we had in common, she told a different story and a different lie, all to her favor, of course. They went from, he's impotent, to, I was afraid that he was going to kill me. I understood that she was trying to justify what she did to me to keep her friends and justify the cheating. Of course, it pissed me off. But what really got me flabbergasted is that some people actually believed her. People that I once considered family believed that I was capable of doing such things. It really broke my heart again. Some of our friends in common didn't buy her lies and texted me saying that it's clear what happened and I wasn't capable of the actions she was telling everyone. I was livid. I think I was never that angry before or after in my life. But in the end, I did nothing about it. I came to the conclusion that the people that believed her without talking to me were never really my friends, regardless of my feelings or consideration towards them. I also had bigger problems in my hands. How was I supposed to pay for my studies now? The time to pay up the school was coming, and I had no idea what to do. Nevertheless, my ex-mother-in-law texted me asking me to pay her up for the cabinets and paint job that she paid for in my apartment. Basically, she was asking me to pay her back for a gift, but fine, let's do it. I explained to her what was going on with me, all the details, the slander, how her daughter and I had an agreement, that I was only in this situation because of what she did to me, how she did it, and that she got all my money. And that, after hearing all of it, if she still wants to be paid, that I would find a way to pay her back even if it takes my whole life to do it. The only answer I got was, oh, never mind that then. I loved my ex-mother-in-law as a true member of my family, and I still only have positive feelings towards her. I remember it like it was yesterday, the day that a miracle happened in my life. I was actually in a calculus class trying to figure out how to pay the school, calculating what I could and could not do, when I received a message from my sister. A company that owed me money finally paid up. I had no hope whatsoever on collecting that money. They paid up the exact amount that I needed. It was during my most financially desperate time that they decided to pay. I can only consider this a miracle. What are the odds? I hope none of you ever experienced this amount of frustration, desperation, and anger that I felt ever in your lives, and I mean it. I decided to go out that weekend to celebrate with a couple of friends where I could tell them the whole story of what happened until that point. It was an interesting experience. As I was telling them, the whole bar started to listen to my story. I've never had free drinks from strangers before. That was the very first and last time. I noticed a couple of friends were really uncomfortable. One was drinking like there was no tomorrow. I asked what was going on. Then, my neighbor's wife said, "I'd like to tell you something, but I promised not to tell." It was the exact situation I dreamed of. My body became cold, and I said, "I think I know what you're talking about." I continued, "She's pregnant, and it's a girl." "How do you know?" she asks. "I had a dream where I dreamed of this very moment," I explained. Everyone was surprised, of course. My friend that's drinking like there was no tomorrow sighs in relief. "At least I don't have to break my word." He told me that he was drinking like that because he wanted to tell me, but didn't know how. From then on, the only thing I knew is that X and Dick moved to his home country, and they were living with his parents. She didn't speak the language, but I guess she learned it by now. She indeed had a baby girl, and I know nothing more about that. I had several hardships over the past few years, but ended up graduating in winter semester of 2016 as one of the best students of that class, and I was invited to be salutatorian, which I accepted. I got a couple of jobs after school, but ended up working in the gaming industry again, where I was just promoted. I'm still waiting on my immigration process that hopefully will be done in the first semester of 2020. My story continues. I licked my wounds and have a bunch of scars, but I'll keep going, keep fighting for the bright future I know I can have. I'm much more mature now. I know who I can trust, and I know that I owe so much to my friends and family for the support they gave me. I hope you can take inspiration on this part of my story. Keep fighting and persevering as I did.
Summer 2018, neighbor's husband. Growing up from the early ages of 18 onwards, I always had this fantasy of being an exhibitionist and exposing parts of my body to strangers in public or people whom I intend to have a sexual relationship with. Doing this turns me on to another level, and sometimes I don't mean it, but the majority of time, it's intentional. My name is Jenny. I'm 20 years old and 5'7", yet petite C-cup, with my best bubbly looking ass. I live with my parents, yet my father works away for every 2 weeks, or a month. Depends on his roster. This incident has taken place during the summer holidays. It was Sunday morning when Mom got a high fever, which led us to the hospital early morning. I was there the whole time taking care of her till we arrived back home. As I rested her to bed and made her a warm soup, I realized that I was actually turned on from the fact that at the hospital I got plenty of stares from many guys. It kind of turns me on when I am able to do such thing without being physical. I was wearing a white cami top with a short denim skirt that reaches to my upper thighs, white thongs and flip-flops with white nail polish. The man who sat near us was just crazy and in deep stares. I mean, I could see other empty seats on the other side, but looks like my view was way better. We were kept in the kids section because the other doctor hasn't arrived yet. The guy opposite me kept giving me smiles, and since I kept adjusting my crossing legs, I'm sure he got a few glimpses of my white thong. I noticed he kept adjusting his bulge. Moments went by, and it was only Mom and I, until this dude came and sat beside us with his little daughter. He had her play with me on a small tablet so that he could interact and see my bare cleavage, legs, and foot up close. The little girl was so adorable I just couldn't resist. I do understand all these small gestures from people, specifically men. I read them like an open book. It's unbelievable. We were called in by the nurse, and on we went. Here, I felt things got a bit naughty because as soon as we entered, I saw the doctor's eyes change from a doctor to a straight-up predator. It was crazy. As my mom sat down in front of the doctor to get examined and asking questions, I was just minding my own business using my phone. He then told my mom to lay in bed and relax while he examines her further. While he was doing that, he kept looking left where I was sitting, watching my legs and asking me basic questions. How is studies, etc. As I intentionally stretched my legs on the other chair while my bare foot and legs were crossed on each other. I could feel him staring while examining my mom, so he then told me to get to the bed and just sit beside my mom while he prescribes her for the medicines. When I got up at the stool and sat on bed, my skirt lifted a bit more upwards, so I crossed my legs, but I know it's useless since he can clearly see everything. I swear the looks and stares he kept giving me was just indescribable. Fast forward, after making Mom her soup, and she rested, I laid in my bed fully naked, just turned on my vibrator and working myself like never before, fingering myself as I moaned ever slightly for the joy that I made a few people hard about me, and it was such a sensational orgasm. Around 4 p.m. the doorbell rang, and to be frank, I wasn't expecting anyone to come since my dad was away. I went down to open the door, and it was our close neighbor. She came to check on my mom, which was so sweet of her. I took this time to have a shower and finally wear some comfy clothes. I wore a loose tank top without a bra and a mini shorts, as it was only us ladies at home. An hour goes by and I hear the bell ringing again. This time it was her husband. As I welcomed him inside, I sat with him in the living room, and for the first time he stared at me like that, from top to bottom, and checking me out while adjusting his bulge. I played a little game which was trying as much as possible to tease him before we go upstairs to see my mom. I got up while getting the TV remote. The side of my petite boobs were clearly exposed, and I was really enjoying it as my nipples are hard on. I was sure I was making him go crazy till the time I escorted him upstairs to my mom's room. Just as they were leaving, the wife said she will come tomorrow morning to check on her again, and we were cool with that. Next morning, I woke up again so horny, it was crazy. I started masturbating passionately, thinking about how it is amazing for people staring at me and enjoy the view. I kept playing with my pussy with my eyes closed. I turned round on my tummy and just poked my ass towards while fingering it hard. I felt so satisfied till I finally got up. Went down first to make my mom tea and some biscuits. gave it to her, and went to shower. When I was about to finish, I hear a doorbell, so in my mind, I knew who it was. I dried myself quickly and took my towel, wrapped it around, and rushed to open the door. Keep in mind, my towel was barely covering my ass bum. As I opened the door, it was our neighbor's husband who came by with a flask of ginger tea. Before even saying hello, he was in shock in the way I appeared. He hesitated, so he gave me a flask and got down to untie his shoes. So he was doing that, I turned around and walked to the kitchen counter to put the flask. While doing that, I am 100% certain he was able to see my ass. And pussy, clearly. That's when I got really turned on. He came in the kitchen and asked for a glass of water, so I took this opportunity to try out a few things. First, I stretched to the upper cupboard to grab a glass, and while doing that, I felt my bum was fully exposed, as I could feel the breeze. And it got even better when I bent down to grab the water bottle from the fridge. I can only imagine by this point he was a rock hard on me. He asked me how's my mom, etc. Just small conversation to keep things going. I said I will take this mug of tea up for her as she will be happy. He said you don't need to tell her I came. I then stretched again to the upper cupboard. At this time, I felt a warm hand squeezing my ass bum while pushing me down to the counter as he unbuttoned his pants and started pounding me hard as he grabbed and squeezed my boobs even harder. I haven't felt so satisfied as we took it to the living room, where he didn't stop bouncing me till he turned me around and fingered my pussy non-stop, which made me shiver from my squirts. It was just fantastic. He then came all over me while leaving me naked on the couch. He told me that all day yesterday he was just jerking himself over me, which made me smile from how naughty I was. That was it.
How losing my mother saved my life. My mother died a little over 2 years ago on October 31st of 2016. It was sudden and sort of unexpected. But then when does one look at death as expected? I digress. Apologies, reader, I tend to ramble. Kudos to you if you get to the end, and it's a bit of a long, painful story, but I feel it's important as well as therapeutic to tell. I moved away from my family, my mom especially, since she and I were the closest, about 3 years ago. My mom was of course sad to see me go, but knew it was best for my family. So I moved, and unbeknownst to me, my mother neglected her own health to care for my asshole male DNA donor and my autistic but amazingly intelligent younger brother. So she got sick. Really sick. Like rushed to the hospital and into the ICU kind of sick. I'm my mother's POA, so I was notified, and she called me to tell me not to panic. So I panicked. Big time. She tells me she had a hard time breathing one day, so my brother tried to convince her to go to the ER. And it got so bad that she got scared and called 911. Saved her life. For a little while. Turns out my mother had a severe case of pneumonia. She smoked. I had suspected for years she had COPD, and she knew but wouldn't tell me. So okay, pneumonia. I work in the medical field. I know it's serious but treatable, and she's obviously doing okay if she's calling me, right? Except at the end, she drops the bombshell. They found cancer on her chest CT. My mother had cancer. That was the first time in the next few weeks my world would shift on its axis. This was October 10th. So I cry and I freak out, but when the nurse takes over and I start asking about stages, type, treatment plans, scans, etc., she was very vague, but told me it was bad. She had met with an oncologist and was going to do chemo. So I relaxed a little, figured it was gonna suck, but we would get through this. The next weeks went by in a blur. I spoke to my mother daily, usually on my ride to work to see how chemo went, how she was feeling, etc. I had made a trip home 2 days after I found out, thanks to some amazing friends and family that helped me and my husband get there. So I laid eyes on her, judged for myself how bad I thought it was. I called her after her chemo appointment, Thursday, October 27th. She was feeling okay, but very tired, so we didn't talk long. I could recall exactly where I was on my drive and what song on Pandora I paused to talk to her. Her last words to me were "bless you for ringing." My mother was British and very verbally proper, so that was her typical goodbye. I hung up from that call not knowing that that would be the last time I heard her voice. Everything was going okay from then up until October 29th. My world shifted again. I got a frantic email from my brother. He doesn't like phones, stating our mother was in the hospital and something about papers that if her heart stopped again, that they couldn't restart it and I needed to call the hospital. So I have a feeling of absolute dread sinking in. It's 10 o'clock at night. What is going on? I call the hospital and find out she is in the ER. Okay, she got sick. Let's talk to charge to find out why. I actually got to talk to the ER doctor that told me my mother was intubated and unconscious in the ER. Cue panic attack. My mother had gotten sick at home, vomited, and we think she aspirated or inhaled her vomit. Bad times. My poor brother called 911 and they came to their house and resuscitated her. But she had suffered brain damage or something because she wouldn't wake up. Then the really bad shocking news. My mother signed a DNR, or do not resuscitate, which means she had legal papers saying that they had to remove the tube and let her go. My mother didn't tell anyone. It wasn't until they got her to the hospital and pulled her records they knew. I am over 800 miles away, and this doctor is saying he has to let my mother die. I am sobbing at this point, begging him to keep it long enough for me to get home to see her. He refused, saying it was her wish to go. I had no choice but to agree. So I went to bed thinking my mother died that night. I called the hospital the next day expecting the news, but my mother was still alive. My hopes soared. My mom is a fighter. The nurse tells me she still isn't conscious. I told her to tell my mom, hang on, I'm coming. I made the 12-hour plus drive home to get to the hospital to see my mother. I got there at 1 a.m. on October 31st, Halloween, my favorite holiday. The third time my world shifted on its axis was sitting in the hospital parking lot preparing to go see my mother. Walking into the hospital was surreal, like I was watching some other daughter walk down the hall to her mother's ICU room. One thing about ICU is how quiet they can be. I stopped at the nurse's desk, told them who I was and who I was there to see. The nurse gave me a sympathetic look and took me to her room. The second I stepped foot in her doorway, I knew my mother was gone. A husk of her lay in that hospital bed, truly one of the most horrific things I have ever seen. Her body struggled to live, these horrible gasping respirations. She was gone, but her body was still here. Meds kept her blood pressure up enough to sustain life. I wanted to rip it all off of her. This wasn't right. I knew my brother needed to be there to say goodbye, so I sat by my mother's bedside alone for 9 hours watching her gasp for air. Her body had shut down, except her heart, lungs, and a tiny portion of brain. It was the worst thing I ever had to do, but I talked to her, told her about my babies and how excited they were to trick or treat. My brother and asshole got to the hospital around 9:30. My mom's oncologist met me before they got there and dropped the bombshell the cancer my mom had was ovarian, with mets everywhere, and she recommended I get tested for the gene that increases risks. I just kind of nodded in shock. I signed the papers to take my mom off all medical support shortly after she left. Once my brother and asshole got there, the nurse took all the machines and lines off, and I held her hands as they gave her meds to make her comfortable. My mother died October 31st at 10:07 in the morning. My whole world fell off its axis. I was now the caretaker of my family, and I had to figure out how to be her. I got things as situated as I could in the 3 days I could stay, arranged her cremation as she wanted, and ended up paying for it because the asshole left her life insurance lapse. I grieved the loss of my mother heavily and had to scramble to take care of my brother and asshole. To say I was stressed and busy was an understatement. I put the oncologist warning out in my head, until almost 2 years later when I had pain in my abdomen. Then suddenly her warning popped in my head. I had blood work done and found out I do carry that gene that increases my cancer risk, right as my own doctor finds a mass on my ovary. Cue world shift again. My doctor immediately orders more scans and schedules me for surgery rather than do a biopsy and wait. I'm on board with this idea, so I went in for surgery December of last year. My doctor found a suspicious mass on my left ovary. He removed both ovaries, both tubes, and mass. The biopsy on the mass actually came back benign, but on my other ovary, the one with no visible mass, they found stage 1 cancer. I had ovarian cancer and had no idea. By doing the surgery, the surgeon actually caught it early. If my mother had not died of ovarian cancer and her doctor told me to get genetically tested, I would not have known I had it until it was too late. Ovarian cancer spreads quickly, and usually by the time it's found, like my mother, it's too late. My blood test result pushed my doctor to do more than biopsy, and removing both ovaries, he caught the real threat. My mother's death saved my life, along with the BRCA gene test. I cannot stress enough that everyone should get that test to find out your cancer risks. Knowledge is power, especially in healthcare. I have sent my mother's oncologist flowers every year on her birthday and Halloween.
How I meet again. So I don't really know how to title this. Let me just begin. Back when I was a kid, I lived in Jacksonville, Florida. I loved it there till I was in the 6th grade. I moved around a lot too. The neighbor which I'm talking about owned a 2-story house next to my family's 1-story house. We lived in that house for a total of 3 years and then moved to a new neighborhood. During these 3 years, me and my brother rarely went outside. Our parents didn't like the idea. Besides, studying to them was a higher priority than anything else, as they were first-generation immigrants and preferred us to get a good education. Anyway, here's where things get interesting. Our parents decided to go to Los Angeles, California. Fine by us. We didn't quite care where we lived, although it was difficult to say goodbye to all of those friends. After having lived 2 years in California, my mom decided to sign me and my brother up for an acting camp. There, I attended the 13 and under class, while my brother attended the 13 and older class. One of the days, we had an exercise where 2 people would tell a story, one made up and one real. Me and another guy convinced the teacher to let us both tell a true story. The story I chose coincidentally took place the few times I went outside in that neighborhood which I lived in for 3 years. In the story, I, for some reason, named both the city and state I lived in as well as the neighborhood. One of the girls who was in my class had around 10 people, asked me after the fact came out that both stories were true. Firstly, she asked where I lived in that neighborhood. I told her right before the speed bump. Then she asked if my family grew things in our backyard, to which I replied that was true too. And lastly, she asked if I had gone outside with my brother to play before, and I replied that was true as well. And as such, I managed to meet my neighbor who I never knew until now across the country in a small acting camp in a class of roughly 10 students. At first, I couldn't believe it myself. Maybe I'd forgotten the actual name of the neighborhood and simply agreed with her because it sounded familiar. But everything she described was accurate. Her house was indeed 2 stories and ours 1. We did indeed live with our grandparents. Me and my brother did indeed go outside sometimes. The addresses matched. The city and states matched. Of course, I was pretty dumbfounded with such a coincidence. What are the odds that 2 kids' parents decide to move across the country to, albeit a popular city, to roughly the same region in the city and sign their children up the same year to the same small acting camp? And what are the odds that I tell that story out of the many which I could have told? And the odds that I listed the city and state where I lived? Oh, and the girl pretty blatantly tried to flirt with me during that class. Didn't particularly like her, but she definitely had a crush on me. Quite touchy, if you know what I mean. This is just some extra info at this point. When we did some games, she liked clinging to me or talking with me every chance she got. I was actually turning 13 very soon during that camp, and as such was far more mature than the 10 or 11-year-olds in that class. I still remember one girl sitting in my lap against my protests because she wanted to win a game. Boy, did I feel flustered then. Well, it's always cool to reflect on the past. Get that type of immaturity going again. Just thinking about it makes me think about luck and how awkward I was back then.
Creepy grocery guy. Little backstory, I was 16 when this happened, and I was in excellent physical shape. I'm now 17. The diner I worked at was on the side of a road and was next to a gas station that we shared car parks with. The diner had an odd setup to get to the back bins and the storeroom. You had to go through a big metal door, and that was at the back of the kitchen. The diner I worked at also had a fresh produce supplier, that delivered most days early in the morning, and they had a new delivery boy. I'll call him Billy. He had been with them for around 2 months. He was a hot topic between the female employees, as he was extremely good-looking, but seemed to be a loner. I don't know for sure, but I think he was around 18 or 19. I'd spoken to him before, and he had asked me for my number once, but I politely said I don't give it out. I was 3 months into my first paying job at a local diner working as a waitress when this happened, and on this particular day, I was asked to stay on and work the night shift with a female colleague that I was familiar with. I didn't mind, as I saw it as an opportunity for extra cash. It was around 12:30 a.m. when the last family eating left. So it was up to me, the other female waitress aged 18, and the male chef, who I believe was around the age of 24, to clean and lock the place up, as the owners were on vacation. I decided to take the trash to the bins out back, as I was too tired to do anything else like sweep up or clean the tables. To this day, I regret being lazy. To get back to the bins, you have to go through the kitchen, and then through a big heavy metal door, which I was okay about doing as I've done it many times before. But once I got out, I forgot that the hinge where the door clips to the wall was broken, and it slipped and closed naturally. I was angry as I'd have to walk around the whole diner to get back in through the front door. As I stretched up to throw the bag in the bin, I heard a noise. It sounded like a grunt, and it kind of spooked me. But I put it down to my imagination. But then I heard it again, and it was coming from the storeroom. Me, being my stupid Dora the Explorer-ass self, poked my head into the storeroom, and at the beginning I saw nothing. But out of the corner of my eye, I caught something moving very slowly toward me, and as my eyes adjusted, it was Billy, the grocery boy. And he was holding his trainers in one hand. Once he saw I noticed him, he froze. I was trying to think through every logical explanation for why he would be in the storeroom at this time. But I got interrupted by Billy stuttering, I'm just putting your delivery in here. My van broke down. That's why I'm so late. This frightened me to the core, as my boss told me she had not made any orders, as we needed to use up old stock first. And then it clicked. He had no shoes on. He was trying to sneak up on me. We just stared at each other, and I muttered, "Oh, that's okay. I'm going inside now. Shut the door when you're done." As I felt if I questioned why he was there, he would get hostile, and the situation for me would become even worse. I proceeded to back away, still facing him, until I was near the gate that opened into the car park. "The kitchen door's shut, silly." He laughed slightly. I've never felt so patronized in my life. He was talking to me as if I was a child that he was correcting. "Oh yeah, ha ha ha. Looks like I'll have to go the long way." I joked about it as I could feel my situation getting worse. He just had an expression that reminded me of that cat from Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, just shut the door when you're done. Bye." I shout out before turning around and opening the gate. My whole body froze when I felt a vice grip on my wrist. Now that I think of it, I'm surprised he didn't break it. By instinct, I started tugging my arm away and shouted at him something like, "Dude, what the fuck? Get off me." But that only seemed to make it worse, and it was almost like he loved to see me struggle. "Stop resisting me," he said in a flat tone as he used his other hand to try and pull my skirt down. I think all my fear turned into fight as I began kicking and punching the right side of his face. I'm about 5'8", and he is probably around 6'2". I think I poked him in the eye with one of the fake nails I had on, and he instantly let go and started cussing very loud. I took my chance and bolted out of the gate and into the car park, which was empty, a part of one car parked in the gas station at a pump. I looked closer. Inside was occupied before I ran toward it. I looked back at the gate and saw Billy running straight at me, calling and shouting things like, "I knew you were a bad girl," and "Get back here, you stupid slut." The loud shouting seemed to get attention of the car. And to my surprise, it was the family that had left 10 minutes before. Once I reached the car, they were all standing outside and looked confused until they saw Billy running towards us. The father and the son stood in front of me and told him to calm down or they'll call the cops. This just seemed to make Billy worse. He started hissing at them and jumped at me before he could grab me. The father grabbed him and pushed him so hard and he fell to the ground. We all just stared at him while he got up off the floor and dusted himself off. "You really should have given me your number." He just nodded his head at me like he was scolding a child. All the fear I was keeping in just came out and I began sobbing hysterically into the mother's chest. The older brother started to cuss Billy out and push him away from all of us. "I like the way you fight me." He smirked at me and turned around and started walking towards the road, the brother following him to make sure he left. When the cops arrived, we went into the diner and I gave a full statement and so did the family. It turns out the other waitress and the chef were cleaning with the radio on with full volume, so they couldn't hear me screaming. When my boss came back, she was told everything by the police, and we now have a new supplier. The kitchen door hinge is now fixed, and I no longer take the trash out at night. As we knew all of Billy's employers, the police paid them a visit, only to be told he quit 2 weeks prior, and the address he had given them was a block of abandoned apartments, and his number was disconnected, so nothing ever came of the police report. I'm now dating the oldest brother of the Diner family. I am so thankful that they couldn't work their sat-nav, because I know I couldn't have outrun Billy to the entrance of the diner.
Sad story from my life. I come back to school after the Christmas holidays, and we have a new girl in our class. We don't talk much at first, since she seems pretty introverted. Soon, she joins my friend group, and we start talking a lot more. I discover she's a gamer girl, and we transition into talking a lot on Discord, too. We talk a lot, sometimes 4 to 6 hours on calls until 2 a.m. I get to know her. She seems really nice, and I get an illusion that I might have a chance of dating her. We carry on being friends for a month with a small, insignificant argument here and there, about things like not caring about each other or not being honest when we annoy each other. We get pretty close and become best friends. She tells me things about her never having a crush, which is understandable since she's young and gets on better with boys than girls. Anyway, we kind of start arguing more frequently for stupid reasons. I admit I was responsible for about half, but once we get that far, she wants to end the friendship, and I go along. We have a pretty deep discussion ending in us realizing we can't replace each other and realizing we have to let go. She asked things like, "Why do you care for me?" So far, we've only been arguing online and acting normal or avoiding each other in real life. Well, that was about to change. The next morning, she messages me with the idea of, let's not talk over messages and just talk in real life, since everything's okay in real life. I go along since I don't want to lose her as a friend, and that argument was generally stupid. So everything goes normal for the next couple of weeks, and 1 week, it gets serious. It was a normal day at school. I came back home and I felt that things were different. We didn't talk much now because of the arguments. I really didn't enjoy being with her, and I decided to write her some message describing how attached I was, how two-faced she acted, acting normal in real life, but then saying dumb stuff in arguments, how much I didn't want to argue, and that something had to change. Well, it turned out to be a 960-word message. Her response was pathetic. Furthermore, I found out she was annoyed by me expressing my emotions. For time's sake, I can summarize her response. Okay, don't suppress your emotions. I didn't expect this. I expected some kind of understanding. Once again, one morning, we get into some argument. She explains her lack of interest as a lack of human emotion when I tried to understand what is wrong with her, like what I did wrong. I didn't understand why we didn't understand each other. Things were about to escalate. Right now, I feel clueless and very confused, not knowing what the best thing to do is. I keep messaging her and trying to figure things out, to understand her at the very least. We get to a very dodgy area. She starts saying things like, "You think I would ask for someone to care about me? No, I want everyone to forget about me so I can finally effing kill myself without hurting anyone. That was when things started to head south. I took it as some sort of joke at first. She joked about suicide a lot before, but now I was a bit concerned. Later, she sends the message of, "You want to see my arm? Oh no, you will think it's an attention-seeking thing." I go along. She sends a pic of her arm scratched to near bleeding. As I later found out, it's not the first year of her doing this. Just before, it wasn't as severe. I felt bad like anyone would. The same day after school, I message her that I feel bad. I know it wasn't because of me, but the least I could have done is be there for you and not annoy you with arguments. My feelings didn't matter at that point because she was my best friend for a while and I wanted to help. We message a bit. She's very hostile. I want to help. She doesn't take it. I ask why she says it's none of my business. It was my business. If it wasn't, I wouldn't feel bad. She says, just because I showed you a picture of my arm, you don't have to start pretending you feel bad for me. Introduce SB, suicide buddy, or her now best friend. SB is a 13 to 14-year-old male that attempted suicide last year in the previous grade and is now her best friend. She said things like, because if I died, you wouldn't care. I just need to get my family to stop caring. Then, SB, then I can be free. Is that enough escalation? No? It's about to get much worse. From the previous conversation, I realized she was really suicidal or was trying to fake it. It seemed fake to me at the time because she had no reason to do it. She had friends, she had family. Turns out she had to go to a therapist a couple of years ago for the same reason. I still don't know. Probably those scratches were from a year ago. She tells me she's a very morbid person and there's nothing wrong. I start realizing that I can't help her. I'm clueless about what to do, so me, being the idiot I am, keep messaging her. It's us discussing how she was a B to me, and she's agreeing, discussing how she's very fake, and her incapability to feel human emotions like remorse, happiness, and love. I realize she's been through many things and that I am helpless, and nothing can change her past. The only thing that can be changed is her attitude. It's never late to start again. Trust people again, feel happy again. I explained this to her as a last-ditch attempt. Well, guess what? That only made her laugh, and it backfired on me. Backfired on me, you'd ask? Yes. We were discussing how I didn't know what led to this lifestyle when out of the blue she sends me an interesting image. An image of a girl ran over by a truck with all her vital organs just out in the open. I feel disgusted by just remembering it. She found it interesting from a biological point of view. Being very creeped out, I try to explain how she's not normal. How looking at those kinds of things isn't okay. I ask her, what if she was that girl? And this is what frightened me the most in her response. She said, what dies or experiences the pain? If I deserved the pain, I'd do it. The next couple of days was us arguing about her being sociopathic, feeding on people's emotions and having a lot in common with SB. SB is even more effed up than her. According to one of my friends, they watch strange types of hentai together. The next day, I come home to about 20 messages, reading something like, how do you want me to kill myself? I tell her I don't want her to die. I regret knowing her and that I hope she becomes normal, but without me being her best friend. This escalates to her sending more of those images, which I prefer not to describe. It's some not safe for life content. I don't know where she got them from, and I'm grateful she stopped sending them. Furthermore, it gets out of hand to the point where she begs me not to tell the school about it, because she doesn't want to go to a therapist again. 3 days later, last day of school before quarantine, we message under the table in class for a bit. I got some emotions out of her. I made her realize what kind of person she is, and she admitted. However, she is too weak to change and has adapted to this lifestyle. To conclude, what I'm left with is someone I wish I had never met in my friend group. Someone I had feelings for, but now every thought of her makes me feel disgusted. Thanks to the quarantine, I don't have to see her anytime soon. What do you guys think?
Spirit, universal signs, or final destination. It's 9/11/2018 at 10:30 a.m., and I'm having the most weird day of my life. But this weirdness isn't just affecting me. My boyfriend is also having an off, weird, and unsettling day as well. We woke up between 5:30 to 6 a.m., not on purpose. But this isn't an odd occurrence for us to wake up early. I have a kidney disease, so when the pain is high, I cannot sleep. He usually stays up with me until I feel better. Nothing weird started happening until around 7 or 8 a.m. He goes off in a trance, and I knew he had seen something that had freaked him out. I asked him what he had seen, and he replied, "Thought I seen a white light go from the kitchen door to the bathroom door, but my eyes were probably playing tricks on me." I had replied to that with a simple, "You're tired. Go get some sleep." But once he's awake for good. Some time goes by and I see a white, round, and bright light that resembles an orb fly from the kitchen to the bathroom. I got freaked out and expressed to him what I had seen. We sat for a little bit being spooked. We decided to play with an Ouija board. Wonderful idea, I know. Nothing happened. It didn't work. Or did it? We started hearing knocks and threes in our kitchen. Went to investigate. Nothing. Appeared normal. It happened 3 times. Hasn't happened since. This was 8:38 a.m. After this happened, my boyfriend randomly says, "Oh, today is 9/11," and we go on discussing that topic a little bit. Then we decided to Google signs of ghosts in house. Another wonderful idea. And the signs seemed true. For us, at the moment. Knocks, orbs, etc. Then I stumbled across pages like, "Signs a spirit is trying to communicate with you. When will you die? And how will you die? Quiz." I clicked every page, and, well, here's my discoveries. Spirit communication. Sending certain numbers or words. Radio stations. Light bulbs going out frequently, which doesn't happen all the time at our house. Death date. Took the quiz. Got a long time before I die. Year 2069. The boyfriend got 2092. No, we do not believe in this. Did it merely for shits and giggles. How will I die? I got car accident and he got in his sleep from old age. Again, do not believe in this, but it does have significance to my story. Nothing else happens weird. I'm still feeling sick and pain, but it's time for him to work. I drive him to work because he can't drive at the moment. This is where our day gets weirder. Like, guys, I'm talking the feeling of final destination. We keep hitting all red lights. Nothing unusual though, except he goes to turn on the radio. "Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light." Funny coincidence? We laughed it off and continued our car ride. I take the exit to the interstate and he flips radio stations. Interstate driving. Okay, not funny anymore. We started getting spooked. Talk about the spirit communicating through radio stations. We get on the interstate and this van pulls out in front of me with a huge red or white sign that read September 11th, 2001. Remember how I was discussing 9/11, today's date? Strange, I tell him. I'm having anxiety. I slow down, drive with more caution than usual. He flips radio stations. "I'm feeling anxious." And we both get even more spooked. Turn off the radio. Drove past this loud sound, construction zone, and it freaked me out. Felt more louder than usual. And I literally felt like I was in Final Destination. Rolled up my windows and we discussed being spooked. Reached his work. Nothing else happened. He's there currently. I don't work until 6:45 p.m., so I'm currently home while writing this. I feel I'm being watched. I have heard the creaking of the floor where you have to stand to make it creak, and I have the feeling of something bad is going to happen. I'll keep updated in comments, but I wanted this day documented. I also want to know if anyone has this type of stuff going on to them, especially the radio stations. I'm a big believer in universal signs, But now I'm debating whether a spirit is trying to contact me. What do you think? The really strange loss prevention guy. I'm bored. Thought I'd tell my story about a creep I had to work with when I was a teenager. I won't give a name to the store, but I'm sure you will figure that out easy. It's a lower-end Walmart that usually hosts a lower-end pizza chain inside. Well, I worked in the pizza part at 18 years old. It was probably my 3rd week at the job when the loss prevention guy Chad comes over and orders a pizza. I'm ringing him up when he stares at me for a while and he says, "Are you the new girl?" I smile and nod. He tells me I should follow him to his office. I kind of look back at my manager confused and my manager tells me it's okay, he will cover my spot. So I follow Chad to the back of the store. On the way there, he is pointing out all cameras in the store, like on the ceiling, and explaining to me how those are just the ones you see. There are the ones in places you would never expect you are being watched. I just nod and say, yeah, cool, wow, because I could have cared less and thought there was not too much purpose for me to go in this little tour or know these things. We make it back to his office, and it's tiny, just a wall half filled, with monitors and a couple computers, a large desk, and his chair. He closed the door, skirted past me, and sat on his chair, and I stood by the door because there was nowhere else to go. He starts talking about his job and what he is supposed to do there, and how that included even watching the pizza employees, because the employees are known for stealing slices of pizza without paying. He tells me a story about how just a few weeks before I was hired, they fired 3 guys at the same time on the spot, because the day before they ate the extra breadsticks on their lunch and didn't pay for it. He gets really stern for a second and asks me seriously, "Have you ever stolen anything before?" I start to get really serious, back in a particularly snarky and sarcastic way. "Oh, no, never, Chad. I have never and I will never steal anything." I was actually a career criminal at this point in my life. The only reason why I was working that job is because I moved across the country for a fresh start, because a few years before I was a druggie and funded my habits through a great deal of theft. Eventually, I was slapped with an assault with a deadly weapon, but I got those charges cleared, and everything eventually went off my record. I knew there was no way he would know any of this. My record was squeaky clean at this point. He just laughs and says, "Yeah, right, I don't believe that. I just played along. I'm a really good person. I would never ever do something like that. It's yucky." He just stares at me and says, "I think you're hiding something." I'm like, "Okay," and stay quiet. He says, "You moved here to this small town from a big city. And when I asked around about you, turns out you moved here without any family either. For a young girl like you, that's really suspicious. I think you're running from something." I just shrug and say I'm independent. However, starting to get really annoyed that I'm being grilled for no reason by a rent-a-cop. He says he wants to show me some things. He turns around and starts explaining some of the tech behind the security cameras, showing me some real-time video of the store. He points out these 2 girls walking around, and he goes on to explain on how he can zoom in and be able to read what is on their phones. And he then chuckles and says, "Say hi to your boyfriend from me," which I can only imagine meant he was reading my phone screen when I was on my break. He starts to say how he has been watching me from the security camera, as he does with all new employees, and says I have strange habits. I just stay quiet. He pulls up past footage, like remembers the date off the top of his head, and it's me walking into the bathroom. I'm like pretty creeped out at this point, but I stay quiet. He says, "This is the only time I have seen you go to the bathroom since you have worked here. And you work late and overtime. Don't you have to go more often?" I just say, "Bladder of steel." He goes, "Uh-huh," like he doesn't believe me. He then pulls up footage of me talking to some guy on my break, and I say snarky, "Oh, look, there's my boyfriend you want me to say hi to." He then pulls up some things on his computer, and he explains how all the employees are given a number that they can use in the store at checkout for an employee discount. I already knew this because I was given my number and have just been using it frequently. He explains to me how he can even track employees' purchases, the date and exact time. He puts in my employee number, which was written down on a post-it note, next to him, and pulls up my purchase history in front of me. He says, "I have learned you have quite the sweet tooth." Then he says, "Let's look at your last purchase, made at midnight, just the other day." He says, "Oh, look at this. Tampons and pads, and you are still hardly using the bathroom." I was major creeps out and said I had to get back to work, and I just left and hurried back to my station. It left a really bad feeling in my stomach, and I stopped using my phone on break or buying anything from the store. He didn't come around for his lunch break for a while, until a few weeks later, when he decides that he wants to come back behind the restaurant and help us kids out, because he said he worked in some fancy restaurant way back when, and he wants to teach us a thing or two. I found it really annoying for him to be in my way and feeling he needed to teach me how to do everything. He always has to be working right next to me and correcting everything I did, but our manager didn't care, so I couldn't do anything about it. He was always asking me really personal questions about my life, trying to know more about my past, how he couldn't find me on social media, and even went as far as to ask me once if I was having sex with my boyfriend. He would even walk over to the restaurant after my lunch break to remind me to remember to pay for my pizza slice before I go home, only to walk back to his office. He has even called to remind me on the store phone. I finally had enough when one day my boyfriend got let off work early, and he decided to stop by my work and grab a large pizza for us to have for dinner, and give me a ride since I was getting off of work soon as well. Well, Chad so happened to be helping in the restaurant that day and saw me wave hi to my boyfriend and tell him I'm getting off work in about 20 minutes while a coworker rang him up. I went to the back and started finishing up some dishes when Chad comes back there and confronts me. He says, "So that's your boyfriend, huh?" I'm like, "Yep," and try to ignore him. He says, "Well, I don't really like him coming into my store. I don't like the way he looks, and I don't trust him, so you can't bring him around anymore." He started asking for my boyfriend's first and last name and date of birth and all that. I just said, "I don't think you have that kind of power." He walked away. I went home, and while my boyfriend and I were eating dinner, I get a call from the store manager saying Chad did an investigation on the people I bring into the restaurant as guests, and that one of them has piercings and tattoos and long hair, my boyfriend, and even a DUI. His father did, but not my boyfriend. And the store manager told me until my boyfriend gets a haircut and dresses more nicely, he can't come into the store anymore. I was shocked. So shocked. I just said, "Okay." I hung up and thought about it more. This was a big box stores. Hundreds and hundreds of customers in and out every day. And they banned my boyfriend because he looks too punk. I walked into the store manager's office the next day and quit. And I flipped off one of the security cameras on my way out because I knew Chad was watching me. I couldn't take another second of that creep. Most definitely one of the strangest experiences I have ever had anywhere, at a job or with anyone, really.
White boys can't run. In 1966, when my Uncle Rob was a mere 10-year-old boy, He was well known for being a fast runner. According to my father, Uncle Rob wasn't just fast. He was without a doubt the fastest kid in town. However, my father is known to embellish. He also claims Eddie Murphy went to his school. Although he admits that the Eddie he knew was a tall Irish red-headed kid with freckles. He was always quick to point out lots of celebrities have had plastic surgery. Being the fastest kid in town was how Uncle Rob got his job as a paperboy. His boss concluded if he was fast on his feet, he'd be even faster on a bike. Uncle Rob would get on his bike, throw a paper on the steps, and take off to the next house. If he hit a puddle, he took off faster, which fortunately didn't happen much. When he needed to get paid at the end of each month, Uncle Rob would go door to door reminding customers who he was so they would pay him. Most of Uncle Rob's customers paid promptly without any hassles. However, the last house on the street was another story. It wasn't the last house. He only saved it last as they made him work for his paper money more than the others. In 1966, many black families didn't have the luxury of a paved driveway. Instead, they just had rather hard gravel all the way up and down the street. Hard to drive on, and even harder if you were riding a bike up the hill. But that wasn't the reason why Uncle Rob didn't like this house, although it didn't help getting there any faster. Uncle Rob will never forget the first day he went to collect from the owner of that house. When he got off his bike and walked to the door, someone was already waiting for him. She was a large black woman, and was waiting for him when he came up the driveway on her porch. I always pictured her chewing because a big woman always looked more intimidating when they're chewing. Maybe it's because it instills fear that if you make them mad, you'll be the next thing they chew on, so it's best to stay on their good side. When he reached the front steps, she waddled down the porch stairs and looked him straight in the eyes. Clearing her throat, she said, "So, you're that white boy who can run fast." Yes, ma'am," Uncle Rob said, wondering where this was going. "Just how fast are you?" Pretty fast, I guess." "Can I see you run?" "Well, I really should be getting back to my route. I have more papers to deliver," he lied. "I just want to see you run. Then I'll pay you. Is that too much to ask?" "Well, okay, I guess I could." "Good. Now try and catch my son," she said, smiling. "What?" Uncle Rob asked, not sure if he'd heard her right. "My son, Whippy. I need you to catch him," she said as if it was a normal request. "Well, where is he?" "Right there." She pointed to Whippy, who was slouching by a tree. Whippy was well known in the neighborhood for being a little odd, and some kids said he wasn't all there. When playing baseball, he would run every base, whether he hit the ball or was tagged out. Either he didn't understand the game or didn't care. He just liked running. Uncle Rob looked at Whippy, who, unlike his mama, was skinny and about a year younger than him. Then he looked back at the mother. "I'm not sure I understand. Your son's right there. Why should I have to catch him for you?" Whippy's mother smiled and turned to her son and hollered, "Whippy, take off!" Hearing that, Whippy bolted off as if he were on fire and took off running down the street. Whippy's mother then turned back to my Uncle Rob and smiled wider. "You want to get paid? Let me see you catch my son. We'll see who's faster." Uncle Rob looked at Whippy's mother and saw that she was dead serious. "Can I use my bike?" he asked. "Nope, that defeats the purpose. You gotta catch him on foot," she said. "Of course I do," Uncle Rob mumbled. So Uncle Rob took off after Whippy. Maybe his adrenaline kicked in, or maybe he realized it was easier to catch Whippy rather than arguing with a crazy woman. In any case, the chase was on. Whippy didn't make things easy. He didn't just run fast. He ran between every fence post, jumped every bush, and sprinted around every tree he could find like an obstacle course. If there was ever a kid who'd try and make Billy from the family circus jealous, Whippy was that kid. Eventually, Uncle Rob did catch him, and by catch I mean tagged him on the back. He wasn't about to tackle Whippy to the ground. He was a runner, not a football player. Satisfied, Whippy's mother paid Uncle Rob. As he picked up his bike, Whippy's mother called out, "See you next month." Uncle Rob's stomach lurched. There was something in the way after she said next month that let him know this wasn't just a one-time thing. Sure enough, when the next month came, Whippy and his mother were both waiting for him. This time, Whippy jumped off the porch the moment Uncle Rob's bike hit the ground. So again, Uncle Rob took off after him, and again, he managed to catch him. It was the same thing the following month, and the month after that. Eventually, Uncle Rob settled into a routine. He'd ride up the unpaved driveway, put his bike down, look at Whippy's mother and say, I know, I've got to catch Whippy," then take off running after Whippy. It's hard to say who enjoyed this more. Whippy's mother, who clearly got a lot of entertainment out of watching Uncle Rob run, or Whippy, who enjoyed making this difficult as much as was possible. Uncle Rob complained about this to his boss and parents, but his boss didn't think it was a problem. So you have to run for your money. You're the fastest kid in town. You shouldn't be that hard to catch, his boss said. As for Uncle Rob's parents, they were too busy laughing to give any sound advice on the matter. Having no luck with his complaints, he gave up and continued with the monthly whippy chase for a year. Eventually, he got sick of it and quit the newspaper route. I can't say if Whippy and his mother played the strange game with the new paperboy. Not that they wouldn't still have enjoyed it, given their weird sense of humor. But we have no way of knowing, as Uncle Rob never saw them again. Years later, Uncle Rob went on to run track in high school. Seems the whippy chasing did some good after all. This is one of my dad's favorite childhood stories. Strangely, Uncle Rob doesn't share this sentiment. He won't talk about the story when we ask about it, not the way my dad does. None of us know where Whippy and his mother are now, or if they have their own version of this story they tell with their children and grandchildren. If they are out there, I'd like to thank them for making me laugh and giving us such a great story to tell.
Weird kids, college, and breasts. Okay, so during my sophomore year, 2017, of college, there was this interesting thing that happened. It's not so more interesting, but rather weird, to an extent, I guess. It's the evening time, and I have to go to my game development class. So when I enter the classroom, I see one of my buddies sitting at a computer, and I walk to sit next to him. Until that moment, everything else is happening as normal. People file into the classroom, sit down and start talking, waiting for the teacher to take roll and ultimately start class. So the teacher arrives and starts taking roll. She's going down the list as normal. When she gets down to a couple of us, she just marks us down since we already had her freshman year. After she gets done, she starts the lesson. At this point, the classroom is relatively quiet since we're focusing on the code. Okay, so this is where it gets different. For the sake of this retelling, I'm going to call the odd kid Billy, since I don't remember his name, so randomly Billy says in an extremely high voice, "What size are your breasts?" The rest of us are just in shock. I try to give Billy the benefit of the doubt. I turn to my buddy and tell him maybe he's just talking to a friend on FaceTime or perhaps Skype. My buddy says that it's a low possibility since he's sitting directly in front of the professor. The professor responds saying, excuse me? Without missing a beat, Billy responds by saying, "I said, what size are your breasts?" At this point, there is a couple of faint laughing that is filling the room. The professor then walks a little bit closer to Billy and says something along the lines of, "I don't really think that is an appropriate question to be asking." He then turns to her and bold-faced says, "I guess there are small since you don't want to tell me." As soon as he says that, we all burst out into laughter since it was just so peculiar that someone could just say that. The professor then orders Billy to go wait outside until the end of the class. That way, she can talk to him about his inappropriate behavior. The only problem with this is that the whole class is roughly 2.5 hours long, and we were only 45 minutes in. As Billy is packing up his stuff, he starts mutter some strange things to himself. I guess he thought he was quietly speaking to himself, but the rest of us could hear him, loud and clear. He started to say that if he can't get his way, everyone else would have to suffer, and that he wanted to go play Beyblades, etc. It was a whole lot of mixed mumble-jumbo. After everything was all said and done, Billy left the classroom to wait. At the end of class, Billy was, of course, nowhere to be seen. The weird thing about all of this, that it was still the beginning of the semester, and we still had around 12 weeks left of the class. I wish I could say that was the last weird interaction that he had in our class, but it was actually one of many memories that I vividly remember.
Be careful what you wish for. I was pretty much effed from the start. My father was a really effed up person, like molested as a child, and a Marine during Vietnam. Into every drug you can imagine, and drank like a fish. My mom was very smart, but also horribly effed up by her childhood. She was the oldest of 3 kids and had to help work and take care of the other 2 when her dad split. I was born on the Gulf Coast in Mississippi. The odd thing to me is that I remember my first birthday party, and then nothing else at all until I was about 5 or 6. My dad was always in and out of the scene. Here today, gone by tomorrow. My mom was trying her best as a semi-single parent. By this time, she had become an OBGYN. Don't really remember when, but we moved to Alabama at some point. During one of the times my dad was actually around, he ended up blowing the back of his foot off with a shotgun. He was taking it back to the pawn shop he bought it from and was pulling the slide back to see if it was loaded, which, of course it was, and fired while resting it on his heel. And from here, the long, downward spiral begins. One of the earliest memories after my first birthday party is my mom going to pick deadbeat dad up from living in the bushes behind McDonald's. He was taken by helicopter to the University of Alabama hospital for hours and hours of reconstructive surgery. After a couple of weeks, he was sent home in a cast, which always struck me as odd. The wound ended up getting infected. And very long story short, they had to amputate just below the knee. Get a wonderfully terrible prosthetic paid for by the good old VA, which never fit right. He was in constant pain for the rest of his life. He always had very bad phantom limb syndrome and ended up, by the time everything was said and done, taking methadone for pain management. My mom ends up getting a job offer with the state of Tennessee, so we move again. Everything goes all right for a while in a little private school in the area, basically raising myself since my parents had no idea how to raise a child and had tons of their own crap going on. We stayed stable for a couple of years before he took off again. We had to sell the property we owned and move into an apartment. She's still doing OB, and now I'm getting drugged to the hospital at all hours of the night if she has to go in. My dad shows back up, and we move into this crappy ancient house. During this time, the magical drug called Stadol came out on the market. Supposed to be a non-addictive narcotic, which it absolutely wasn't. My mom came across it because they were pushing it for use in labor pain. She ended up writing a bunch of prescriptions for it for my dad, which of course got her in hot water pretty quick. But not before my dad, my mom, and myself, at the ripe old age of 12, were addicted to it. The local medical people she worked with figured it out. She lost her license and got in trouble with the DEA. So she's effectively out of a career, and my dad has never brought any money in. So overnight we go from an upper middle class family to completely broke, living in low income housing. After about another 2 years, my dad kills himself by taking an entire bottle of his methadone. Was having seizures and some other issues by this point as well. I remember the night it happened. I had gotten carted over to my grandparents for the night. I had an idea that something was up, but no idea what was going on. About 2 in the morning, the phone rings. As soon as that first ring wakes me up, I knew exactly what had happened. A few minutes later, my grandfather takes off. After another couple of hours, the phone rings again, and it's official. So at 15, I get to see my dad's cooling corpse. During the time he was still alive, and for a while after he died, we moved all over the place with my mom, trying to get around her past DEA issues or trying to find other work. By the time I was 18, I'd lived in every single state in the Southeast. After my dad died, I started doing some work here and there to help bring in some money, and ended up working at a little computer shop in the town we lived in. I ended up homeschooling through high school. We were always moving, so there really wasn't an opportunity for a real school. Homeschooling is in quotes because I wasn't really doing the work anyway. Ended up taking my GED to get out a year early. Started working full-time in tech at that point. About this time, my mom gets diagnosed with inoperable stage 4 cervical cancer. Over the next 2 years, I spend most of my time either in or driving to and from hospitals, doctors, chemo, all manners of crap, while watching my mother slowly wither and die. A few months before her death, I took a job back in Alabama. So now I'm driving every weekend back and forth from Tennessee to Alabama. I remember the night she finally passed. I got the call about midday that I needed to get up there. So I jump in the car and book it. When I finally got there, she looked like she was dead already. If you ever saw any of the pictures of Terry Schiavo, that's pretty much what she looked like. To this day, I can't really close my eyes without seeing her like that. Within 3 years of that, I got to do it again the exact same way, first with my grandmother, then my grandfather. All the people back and forth to the doctors, watching them slowly wither, getting to be the only one there when they died. I started drinking really heavily after that, going through hundreds of dollars worth of liquor in an evening, and found not only a completely drained bottle of vodka, but one of Everclear as well. I never had time for a childhood or a teenagehood. I never had a first date, never had a first kiss, a first love. Just got taken straight from infant to fending for myself. I focused on my job and woke up one morning to discover I'd gotten my biggest goal from childhood. I wanted to be the guy running the tech department in a big national company, traveling all over, riding elevator up to my office every day. Well, I got it, and realized I had sacrificed absolutely everything to get it. So now, I'm all alone. I don't believe I could ever attract a mate. I'm burned out. I hate my job. I hate my life, if you can call it that. I hate dealing with people. I hate even the interaction required to go to the store. I'd be a complete shut-in if I can manage it. But at the same time, so lonely and sad that I never learned how to actually interact with people or have a social life. I never go out socially at all, so I have pretty much no chance of ever finding someone. I'm just so tired of life, of being alone, of never having any emotional or physical contact with another human being. Tired of being out of sync with the rest of the world. Tired of being the 35-year-old virgin. Tired of being me. Just can't figure out why I keep getting up in the morning and doing the same things over and over again. Be careful what you wish for. You may just get it in the most unsatisfying way possible.
Crossroads. I always remember how our walking you home started. It was on the evening after a final term exam we gave together, and I did not want to let you go home alone, as you always do. Surprisingly, you let me. Unlike the other days when I'd keep on pestering you two. It had opened up the pathway to a regular happening in our lives, where I'd take you home every day or even accompany you from your home. Even though it has been many months since we last got to walk together again. But just for the sake of today, I wanted to experience it again, to walk on that path again. The last few times, it used to start from the plinth of the Fine Arts Building, where you and I would sit for hours and talk under the eerie evening light or the golden afternoon. Then you would get up, say your mother is going to kill you if you delay any longer, and from the path behind the building, our journey would start. The sodium golden lights on the road would always light up as soon as we would start, as if a cluster of fireflies to lead us through our regular path into the night. On our way, there would be so many crosswalks to go through, even a busy crossroad just before your house. You never could cross roads properly, and it would always be my responsibility to lead you safely to the other side. Sometimes you would hold my hand or my shirt's cuff while crossing if you felt too afraid or overwhelmed by the traffic. I would always pull you through no matter what. Then, we would go on walking, and our shadows would get closer than our bodies. Maybe I will try to slide my hand into yours as well, wouldn't I? It is raining right now, and I do not have an umbrella. The raindrops fall on my head and slide through my scalp, mixing with sweat on my forehead, but I don't mind as I walk. Even if I had an umbrella, I would always give it to you, because it is embarrassing to walk under the same umbrella. Even after 2 years of being together, it was always so awkward and embarrassing. But right now, my scarred feet hurt like hell. No, I still want to walk with you. So I do, and so I will. Why not? After all, I walked with you for almost 7 kilometers, didn't I? When did feet ache ever matter? You would vent at me for walking with my shoes rubbing the ground. But right now, I do not really know where you are. You might be on a car going to or from home, or you might be somewhere else, to find somebody else. Oh, hey, that girl looks like you. Hey, it could be you. Oh, no, it isn't. Would you call me if you saw me? Would you even recognize me after so many months? Please tell me your memories of me have not faded yet. Oh well, it does not matter. I will just pretend that you are walking beside me. That is better, isn't it? Getting drenched with me, passing that familiar burger stand right after that tall building that we always make fun of. You're so quiet, so maybe I'll just sing La Vie en Rose to you. It will help, won't it? Remember, I did sing that on the night when I first realized whatever I did or tried to do was not really enough, didn't I? Even though we were both broken, I had to let you know somehow that it will be all right, didn't I? Oh no, it's already the dark intersection. I stopped my pace. I don't want you to go right now. Why not just a few more minutes? What will happen if you go home just a bit late? You're going to be gone forever, so just take the time before you do. If I could be reborn and reborn, I would live this moment again and again and walk on. But I can't, can I? So? But no, you insist, you have to go. You convince me you have to leave, and it's already been too late. It is already far beyond what you could stay for. But I do not want to let go of your hands. I do not want to leave you out of my sight. But well, finally, I have to accept it. We start walking again, slower than before, and I can make best use of the time by trying to embarrass you as much as I can, saying cliché, cringe romantic things, or trying to read your mind to guess what you're thinking right now. You don't say anything, again, and I realize I cannot really seem to read you anymore. Before I can say anything again, the crossroads come like a car running the red. When we cross the crosswalk, you go straight forward, where your house is, and I go left, onto my bus stop. But there are so many cars and buses and trucks on the busy crosswalk today, much more than any other time, and crossing it is so difficult. I can't get over to the other side so easily, so I try to hold on to your hand. I look at you to tell you that I love you for the last time, because I won't be able to say it again when you go home. But where are you? I search for you here and there, but you've already crossed the road. Thinking back my past 20 years, I just want to write them down. My name is Claire, from C. I would like to be clear, but English is not my mother tongue. I'm 20 years old. February 14th is my birthday. I was born in a little city. It's sort of next to the country's north boundary. I have an older sister and a little sister. Yes, my family only has one male, who is my father. I'll start from as much earlier as I can remember, as possible. Most things only have some pieces left in my mind. As time goes on, it will have more detail. The earliest thing I can remember is when I was 4 years old. My parents both were people who sold wholesale vegetables. As my thought, they were really busy at the time. Every day they woke up very early and brought me to the stall. Small, crowded place. They worked very hard. They were young and energetic. In other words, they were consuming themselves. One thing I remember is that I was hanging out with my friend, passed by a supermarket, and we walked in and grabbed a pack of milk and just drank it. I was too small to know I have to pay. Staff there wouldn't let us go till our parents found us in a hurry after 2 hours, perhaps. This is fresh in my mind because they were so angry and worried about us, while I have absolutely no idea what happened. We were poor, like really very poor. Can't even afford extra clothes or a good meal. By the way, when I was 4, my older sister is a blur in my mind, and my little sister wasn't even born yet. So when I was old enough, I started to go against her. I wasn't doing what she asked, no matter what, so it was kind of extreme. Whenever I didn't want to do what she asked of me, she always made me feel guilty. So I just ignored. I said my family, just normal, and my parents are working very hard, so I'll do some tiny things to let them feel at least relax. 'Cause we can do nothing about their work. For example, When I didn't want to mop the floor, she would say, "They're so tired from working outside. They come back and they see their house so dirty. And I'll feel like it's my fault." I don't talk to my big sister much for a long time. She always has a way to get me pissed off. Maybe I'm too judgmental towards her, but sometimes what she said is really annoying. And I don't like arguing, so I won't talk to her unless I have to. But she's a talker. Her words are plentiful sometimes. I do feel lonely, and I want to go to crowded places, 'cause I want to meet new people and new stuff. An understanding or comfort of what I'm looking for. I'm not a good talker. Don't have any move, just as things go on. I'm eager to be understood, and have someone who can really be with me when I get upset. But I can't find that. I can't be with or close with the same person for too long. At the start, I would have tried my best for that person, but I can't be straightforward with my thoughts. On the contrary, I always want people to care about me, my tiny world, or implied meaning. You can guess. That's basically impossible. So I wouldn't try to explain or discuss anything, but my self-defense starts to build. I like new things, 'cause new people means new me, new experience. I don't like to talk about myself or even don't like to argue or anything. So even sometimes I meet something unfair, I would self-digest, but it's just getting bigger now. I can't digest it myself. There will have to be something I can figure out. So at the moment, maybe I'll leave it. But next time when something happens, I have to self-digest, the past wouldn't come through again. I have strong self-defense. Like if one day I feel you're not really wanting to understand me, I wouldn't ask anything. But the wall between us is building. I would fade. I remember I had a really good friend when I was in primary school. Like we talked about everything and we were always together. But I don't know. I just got tired in the end and tried to keep pushing her away, get her away. She didn't do anything wrong. I just felt suffocated. But people come and go, right? I'm a totally contradicting person. I can't stand people so close to me, but can't even understand me. I was longing to go somewhere very far on my own, like what I said before, meet new people, new experience. So I started to collect relative information about it. But I can't just travel. So I found a volunteer thing. You can get a certificate, which can be very helpful for a job in the future. It also has to be inexpensive. So I chose India. I stayed there for 6 weeks. They covered accommodation and food. All I needed to pay was project fee and a plane ticket. About the project I chose, I didn't think too much. They all have a very similar introduction, so I chose randomly. It's about teaching kids English. To be honest, I prefer to be with kids or pets than older adults. So I made an interview, and I went there. In my case, that would be totally a lone space. Probably at a dog, and in a beautiful countryside that would inspire me. You may notice that surroundings will influence me a lot. But every time when I want to face them, I would get so nervous. Sometime I was thinking maybe I'm a control freak. 'Cause if things out of expectation, I would be like, don't know what to do. I don't even know if I'm really in love with traveling and meeting new things. Maybe that's just an excuse to escape. I'm always chasing something. Currently, I'm not. And put my expectations on that, but the truth is, even though I get eventually sick of things, it won't change too much. I don't know what is wrong with me. You know, I always feel better in places not so familiar to me. That's why I only send letters to foreigners and only join foreign communities. Different languages and culture will minimize my sensitivity, and I would rather travel alone. I may never travel with others. Even travel, I prefer to go to other countries far from mine. You will pay. There are many consequences to your actions, but this time you will pay. Your daughter Julie is mine. You don't deserve to have her. She is being kept safe, for now. For each day that I don't receive my payment, I will mail a piece of this pretty little girl to your house, starting with her feet and working my way up to her head. If you wait too long, there will be nothing left. So I would hurry if I were you. I want 5 million. Don't keep me waiting. The time starts now. L. Mr. Jackson stood in his penthouse office and stared at the note that he just received. Susan, call 911 right now, he screamed. His secretary dialed 911 before asking any questions. His heart was racing, and he called his daughter over and over, but no avail. He anxiously awaited the arrival of the police, and when they got there, he showed them the note. They said that they couldn't do anything until they had some real evidence. They told him to be patient and wait for more notes. A few days passed, and he was growing impatient of waiting for any news. The cops had contacted Mr. Jackson and told him that they turned the case in, but they still have no evidence to go on. He was at work and he couldn't even focus on anything that he was looking at. He looked down at the paperwork that he was working on, and it was all a blur. His vision was deteriorating due to lack of sleep, and his mental illness was slipping out of existence. He looked at the picture of his beloved daughter and deceased wife sitting on the edge of his desk, and he began to cry. His phone began to ring, and he quickly answered. You are running out of time. Your daughter is very beautiful, but she won't be for long. Beep. The call had ended before he could say a word. He stood up and ran downstairs to his car and sped home. When he got home, he ran upstairs to his daughter's room, and it was completely empty. He looked around the room for anything that he could use as evidence to try and get the case going. When he saw it, there was a little red box wrapped in a black bow sitting on the bed. There was a letter beside it with his name on it. His heart dropped. With his hands shaking, he opened the letter slowly. It had been 4 days since I last contacted you. As you can see, I left you a little present. Your beautiful daughter is never going to be as beautiful as she used to be. L. Jackson was at a loss of words. He looked over at the box and his heart sank. Something was wrong. He hadn't been home in a few days and his daughter was missing. So who could have been in the house? He picked up the small box and undid the bow. He closed his eyes and prayed that Julie was okay. He opened the box slowly and discovered a bloody box cutter. The words, "There will be more to come," were written in blood on the top of the box. Jackson immediately called the cops and they rushed to his house. The cops examined the box, they took out the knife, and they found a little bag under it. They took out the bag and their faces were met with horror. There were 4 toenails, one for each day that Jackson waited to pay. The cops called it in, and a giant search started. It lasted all night, but nothing came out of it. Jackson started to panic. Why does this always happen to me? Why can't I ever seem to find happiness? Why is my happiness always taken away from me? He thought. Another day passed, and he got another letter in the mail. It's day 5. I wanted to play with her for a little bit. But now I'm getting bored, so I'll give you the location where I want the money dropped off. Do not get the police involved, or your daughter is as good as dead. I'm watching you. I know your every move. Do anything out of line, and I will kill her. L. Jackson didn't know what to do. He couldn't get help from anyone. He was lost. He was alone. He looked down at the letter. 815 South Pelican Boulevard, 7:30 p.m. Leave the money in a bag on the red park bench and drive away. I will contact you again once this has been done. I will check every day, but you better hurry. She is running out of time. This address is for a local park, he thought. Anyone could just walk up and take it. He brushed the thought aside and went to the bank. He pulled out $5 million and an extra 100,000 just to make sure everything was going to go smoothly. He sat in the parking lot for a while and thought about everything that was happening to his daughter, and he couldn't do a thing about it. He felt helpless. He couldn't stop thinking about how every promise he made her about always being there to protect her was broken the very minute she was kidnapped. He felt so useless and that he had let her down. He opened the glove box and pulled out a sheet of paper. He began writing. I have paid what she wanted, in full, and added an extra 100,000, so please return my daughter. She is my most prized possession, and I can't live without her. I will do anything, please. Let her go. He walked over to the red bench and sat the money down. He put the note in the bag and left. The next day, he woke up to rustling in the kitchen downstairs. He jumped out of bed and grabbed the pistol that he kept in the nightstand beside him. He crept downstairs and looked around the corner into the kitchen. There he saw his daughter tied up. She was sitting in a chair with tape on her mouth. She had tears rolling down her face, and Jackson ran over and untied her. She hugged him and cried. She had no visible scars or bruises, but she had many mental ones. She pulled a letter out of the back pocket and handed it to her father. He grabbed the letter and then opened it without a second thought. You did very well. If you would have gotten the police involved, she would have been dead. If you would have sent only the $5 million, she would be dead. If you didn't follow my directions, she would be dead. Don't worry, I never touched her. The bloody box cutter was from cutting into meat, and the nails were fake ones that I touched up a little to make them look real. She doesn't have a scratch on her. You will no longer hear from me. This is the end. L.
Mom, there's one in every high school, an activity that everyone does for months on end, a fad everyone talks about, and if you aren't doing it, you don't get to participate in the conversation. I'm not talking about drugs or sex, I'm talking about scaring each other. For months in my high school, all anyone could talk about was the haunted houses they visited over the weekends. Jeff floated up the stairs. You could hear the woman crying out for her children. I called bullshit on all of their stories. Even the ones people clearly thought they experienced, figuring it was faulty wiring or old houses settling. I wasn't too interested in their stupidity, but little did I know I was about to experience things for myself, unwillingly. I'm from a very small town in the upper Midwest. My childhood home was literally in the middle of nowhere. Our closest neighbor was about a mile away. The home I grew up in until I was 14 was a rental. Then my parents bought some land and moved a huge old Victorian farmhouse onto it. The house hadn't been occupied in several years, probably decades. The last person who owned it wanted it off his property so the cows could roam free on the land. I still don't know when the house was built, but the original basement had a sign that it was 1909 was the year they installed the furnace, so sometime before that. After the house was moved, there were some repairs that needed to be done before we could move in. It was months before we were able to put anything into it. The first night we actually got to stay there was when I realized my family was not the only ones living in it. My parents picked me up from a school function late on a Saturday. The new house was kind of on the way to the old house, so when my dad turned on the road to go to the new house, I asked, "Where are we going?" To which my dad just smiled. I kindly reminded him that I had the clothes on my back and nothing else to say at the new house. We took a detour back to the old house, grabbing the essentials: toothbrush, pajamas, books, posters. We headed back to the new house. I spent the remainder of my evening putting up the posters I had saved from numerous magazines of cute boys and even cuter animals. I hadn't put them up in the old house, not wanting to rip them down to put in the new house. I listened to music and set up my room for a while before going to bed. Before I go any further, I need to give you a layout of sorts of this house. There are 4 levels: basement, main floor, upstairs, attic. The basement is basically a large living area with the laundry area, no bedrooms down there. The main level is kitchen, dining room, living room, fancy living room, small bathroom. Upper level is 4 bedrooms with a second full bathroom. Attic is a big open space. My parents gave me the option to have my bedroom in the attic or have the master bedroom on the 2nd floor since I would be moving out in a few years. I chose the actual bedroom because I want the closet. The attic never creeped me out. I seriously considered taking it as my room, but I'm a closet girl. What could I say? When you walk up the stairs to the left is my sister's room, and my room because they are both the biggest. On the right is a smaller spare bedroom, my brother's room, and the bathroom between the 2 rooms. The hallway is very wide, and at the end of the hallway is a door to the upper level of the porch. When we first moved in, there was no porch yet, so the door led to a long drop onto a rocky driveway. The master bedroom is huge, almost a perfect square. Since I had not been able to set up my room that day, my sister and her friend set it up for me. They put my dresser by the door, the desk by the window, and the bed on the opposite side of the room from the door. They did a pretty good job. I just had to personalize it, so I turned on some music and shut my door so anyone trying to sleep wouldn't hear. My brother's room is right across the wide hall from mine. His bed was right next to his bedroom door, and his door was cracked open just a bit. By the time I went to bed, everyone else in the house was sleeping. I was just falling asleep in my new bed at the new house when I woken by a whisper. "Mom, Mom." Like when you're little and you wake up in the middle of the night to find you wet the bed or thrown up all over yourself, so you go get your mom and whisper right next to her ear. That's what I heard. I opened my eyes to see nothing. I had cracked open my bedroom door just a tiny bit to allow the hall light to seep in, just in case I woke up and needed to use the bathroom without having to turn on the lights. My closet door was also open about 3 inches. There was no one there who could have whispered. Confused, I fell back asleep thinking it was probably my brother who woke up and being 7 in the new house for the first time was disoriented about what was going on. I didn't say anything to anyone at first, but after I thought more about it, there was no possible way I could have heard my brother whisper from that far away. I couldn't stop thinking about the strange whisper and who it could have been. Also, I'd like to remind you, I now occupy the master bedroom where my parents of the previous family most likely slept. Finally, I told my mom. To my surprise, she didn't dismiss me or tell me I was hearing things or that the house was probably settling. She paused just a second, most likely trying to decide if I was mature enough to handle what she was about to tell me, and said, "I've heard it too." The Silhouette. If you've watched Mom, great. If you haven't, I highly recommend watching it before this to have a better understanding of the situation. All of the events I'm about to describe all happened, for real, to me and my family. It's okay if you don't believe it. I honestly wouldn't either if I was hearing it. I never believed any of the stories from my friends that had experiences. They all seemed like bullshit. I'm still skeptical when I hear some stories. They seem a little too far-fetched or exaggerated for entertainment. Not mine. These are 100% true accounts of what happened. Now, I don't know how the ghost world works. Maybe they're in another dimension. Maybe they could think they're still living. Maybe they could see or sense us all the time, or maybe just at certain times. Our ghost wasn't always around, but he sure made his presence known as soon as there was activity in the house. It hadn't been occupied in decades, so maybe this little kid ghost had been alone for so long, and now all of a sudden there are people around again and he's trying so hard to get our attention. It makes me a little sad to think about it. At 14, you're pretty susceptible to everything around you. Friends, family, movies, and TV. As my mom was studying the look on my face, trying to decide if I should know the whole story, I'm sure these thoughts went through her mind. Does she want to scare the shit out of me, or should she just leave it alone and let me figure things out for myself? She chose option A. I also think she was relieved someone else had experienced something, so she wasn't alone and thought she was just hearing strange voices. She had been under a lot of stress to get the house ready for her family to live in, staying up well into the night at the house, got up to get us ready for school, still had a job, and took at least 2 hours out of every day to do some sort of cardio. She was superwoman. No wonder she may have thought she was just hearing things. Lack of sleep alone will do that to a person. In the winter, my mom rode her stationary bike in the living room after we all went to school. It was loud and obnoxious, so she had to turn on the TV up to a ridiculous volume to be able to hear it over the bike. This was why she preferred to be at home alone when she rode it, so she didn't disrupt everyone else in the house. This was when my mom heard the whisper, "Mom, Mom." She heard it over the loud bike and the loud TV. She paused everything to listen. Completely alone in the house and knowing she was, it was quite a shock. She didn't hear it again, so she kept riding. This is what she told me after I told her I had heard it. Then she said there was more. Over the winter was when she would go to work on the house. Winter in the Midwest means it's dark by 5 p.m. We're used to it, no biggie. So one night, my mom, exhausted, goes to leave the new house to go home to bed. She's driving away from the house down the driveway when she notices she left the upstairs hall light on. She stops the car to go back in and turn it off when she notices something strange. There's someone in the window up there. It appears to be the silhouette of a small child's head and fingers peeking out through the window in the door, as if the child isn't quite tall enough, so they're standing on their tiptoes, gripping the frame to see what's outside. My mom didn't go back in to turn off the light. That was the first sighting. The second was a couple months before we moved into the new house. My parents met with some friends at a bar. They happened to run into the electrician who worked on the house before we moved into it. He had quite the story for them. If my parents were working on the house, it was open and unlocked. You could get from the basement to the attic, no problem. When my parents weren't there, but crews were working on it, they only had access to the basement. The electrician was making a few changes and checks one evening, making sure all was working properly. He had been in and out of the basement, looking at lights and whatnot. He was outside making sure the yard light was going to come on once it got dark enough, and happened to look up at the house and see the silhouette of a child in an upstairs bedroom. He was there alone with no crew members or their children, and didn't even have access to the main level, let alone the second floor. He was clearly shaken up by it and was relieved when my mom said she had also seen a similar silhouette in the window of the door at the end of the hall. He said it wasn't in the hall window, it was in the bedroom to the right. My bedroom. Elliot. So it's been a while since I've been able to continue my story. Sorry. If you're seeing this part for the first time, you should probably go back and watch Mom and the silhouette, because this might not make any sense if you don't. If you had watched them both, you are aware of the child haunting the home I grew up in. He's been spotted and heard. Now I'd like to tell you about a little research my mom did after I told her about the creepy whisper I heard the first night we stayed here. I mentioned my parents moved the house onto some land they purchased. The previous owner was an elderly man who ended up in hospice care, unable to carry on a conversation for too long. When my mom went to visit him, she realized she was not going to get very far by talking to him. He couldn't even remember who she was. No biggie, there are records and death certificates, right? Well, sort of. She ended up finding a small cemetery near the location the house was originally standing. It was a small family one, overgrown and hard to find, but there was a grave that was marked Elliot. The marker said the child died at 6. That seemed about right. A 6-year-old would behave the way our ghost was behaving, but why had Elliot died? In the early 1900s, kids died in their sleep because of numerous things that doctors back then didn't even know about. Simple diseases we're now vaccinated for were terminal back then. Sad, I know. Not completely satisfied with her findings, my mom headed to the library to see what else she could find. Records weren't kept as well as they are today back then, but she did find something. There was a small obituary on a child named Elliot who was said to be about 4 years old. Okay, now what are the chances of a child around the same age, with the same name, dying around the same time on the same property? I think someone messed up on the age or year Elliot died. Either way, Elliot didn't go where they were supposed to go. Not knowing if Elliot is a boy or girl, I have a feeling he's a boy, so from here on, I will call him a he. My mother had to be content with her search for the time being. There are now no living relatives to ask, so we have to rely on records even though there may not be totally accurate. It's a bummer. I'm curious about this child. Why is he still here? What does he need? How can we help him? I have no idea. Not that I didn't try. After that first night of hearing him whisper, I kept the closet door closed, not wanting him to wake me up again. I spent a few evenings in my closet on a beanbag chair trying to talk to him and getting no response. I had some luck with the Ouija board at a friend's birthday party once. I suppose you like to hear that story, and since it's somewhat relevant, here, I'll tell you. My best friend from childhood had lost her grandmother to a heart attack very suddenly when we were in 4th grade. As a 4th grader, those things aren't understood fully like they are when you're older. It really hit her a few years later when she finally realized what had happened, and she got super bummed she hadn't been able to say goodbye. That's when one of us suggested a spirit board. What's the worst that could happen? In our case, her grandma can visit us, and that's exactly what happened. Throughout the night, I had been constantly pulling my hair behind my ear when my grown-out bangs got in my face. Typical 13-year-old, but I wasn't able to push them out of my face since my fingers were glued to the planchette where we were summoning the spirit. I was looking down at the board waiting for words to be spelled out when my hair was gently scooped out of my face and placed behind my ear, much like a grandmother would do for her granddaughter. After what seemed like several minutes, I looked at my friend who was crying. We all immediately took our fingers off the board to console her. Admittedly, a little freaked out, my friend said she was able to say goodbye to her grandma because she had appeared in the corner and smiled at her. She was the only one who saw her, but I told her she had put my hair back behind my ear for me. She had been a wonderful lady, and it wouldn't have been out of the ordinary for her to do that for me. That was before my encounter with Elliot. If my only other spiritual experience had been a less pleasant one, I may have been more apprehensive about the whisper. And since it had been a successful one, I decided to have some friends over and try it myself. We got nothing. Not even a glimmer. Maybe it's because he wasn't related to any of us, or he was just hiding or shy. We will never know. I didn't hear him again while I lived there. That doesn't mean he didn't announce his presence, but that's another story for another day. Keep creepin', peeps. How losing my mother saved my life. My mother died a little over 2 years ago on October 31st of 2016. It was sudden and sort of unexpected. But then when does one look at death as expected? I digress. Apologies, reader, I tend to ramble. Kudos to you if you get to the end, and it's a bit of a long, painful story, but I feel it's important as well as therapeutic to tell. I moved away from my family, my mom especially, since she and I were the closest, about 3 years ago. My mom was of course sad to see me go, but knew it was best for my family. So I moved, and unbeknownst to me, my mother neglected her own health to care for my asshole male DNA donor and my autistic but amazingly intelligent younger brother. So she got sick. Really sick. Like rushed to the hospital and into the ICU kind of sick. I'm my mother's POA, so I was notified, and she called me to tell me not to panic. So I panicked. Big time. She tells me she had a hard time breathing one day, so my brother tried to convince her to go to the ER. And it got so bad that she got scared and called 911. Saved her life. For a little while. Turns out my mother had a severe case of pneumonia. She smoked. I had suspected for years she had COPD, and she knew but wouldn't tell me. So okay, pneumonia. I work in the medical field. I know it's serious but treatable, and she's obviously doing okay if she's calling me, right? Except at the end, she drops the bombshell. They found cancer on her chest CT. My mother had cancer. That was the first time in the next few weeks my world would shift on its axis. This was October 10th. So I cry and I freak out, but when the nurse takes over and I start asking about stages, type, treatment plans, scans, etc., she was very vague, but told me it was bad. She had met with an oncologist and was going to do chemo. So I relaxed a little, figured it was gonna suck, but we would get through this. The next weeks went by in a blur. I spoke to my mother daily, usually on my ride to work to see how chemo went, how she was feeling, etc. I had made a trip home 2 days after I found out, thanks to some amazing friends and family that helped me and my husband get there. So I laid eyes on her, judged for myself how bad I thought it was. I called her after her chemo appointment, Thursday, October 27th. She was feeling okay, but very tired, so we didn't talk long. I could recall exactly where I was on my drive and what song on Pandora I paused to talk to her. Her last words to me were "bless you for ringing." My mother was British and very verbally proper, so that was her typical goodbye. I hung up from that call not knowing that that would be the last time I heard her voice. Everything was going okay from then up until October 29th. My world shifted again. I got a frantic email from my brother. He doesn't like phones, stating our mother was in the hospital and something about papers that if her heart stopped again, that they couldn't restart it and I needed to call the hospital. so I have a feeling of absolute dread sinking in. It's 10 o'clock at night. What is going on? I call the hospital and find out she is in the ER. Okay, she got sick. Let's talk to charge to find out why. I actually got to talk to the ER doctor that told me my mother was intubated and unconscious in the ER. Cue panic attack. My mother had gotten sick at home, vomited, and we think she aspirated or inhaled her vomit. Bad times. My poor brother called 911 and they came to their house and resuscitated her. But she had suffered brain damage or something because she wouldn't wake up. Then the really bad shocking news. My mother signed a DNR, or Do Not Resuscitate, which means she had legal papers saying that they had to remove the tube and let her go. My mother didn't tell anyone. It wasn't until they got her to the hospital and pulled her records they knew. I am over 800 miles away, and this doctor is saying he has to let my mother die. I am sobbing at this point, begging him to keep it long enough for me to get home to see her. He refused, saying it was her wish to go. I had no choice but to agree. So I went to bed thinking my mother died that night. I called the hospital the next day expecting the news, but my mother was still alive. My hopes soared. My mom is a fighter. The nurse tells me she still isn't conscious. I told her to tell my mom, hang on, I'm coming. I made the 12-hour plus drive home to get to the hospital to see my mother. I got there at 1 a.m. on October 31st, Halloween, my favorite holiday. The third time my world shifted on its axis was sitting in the hospital parking lot preparing to go see my mother. Walking into the hospital was surreal, like I was watching some other daughter walk down the hall to her mother's ICU room. One thing about ICU is how quiet they can be. I stopped at the nurse's desk, told them who I was and who I was there to see. The nurse gave me a sympathetic look and took me to her room. The second I stepped foot in her doorway, I knew my mother was gone. A husk of her lay in that hospital bed, truly one of the most horrific things I have ever seen. Her body struggled to live, these horrible gasping respirations. She was gone, but her body was still here. Meds kept her blood pressure up enough to sustain life. I wanted to rip it all off of her. This wasn't right. I knew my brother needed to be there to say goodbye, so I sat by my mother's bedside alone for 9 hours watching her gasp for air. Her body had shut down, except her heart, lungs, and a tiny portion of brain. It was the worst thing I ever had to do, but I talked to her, told her about my babies and how excited they were to trick or treat. My brother and asshole got to the hospital around 9:30. My mom's oncologist met me before they got there and dropped the bombshell the cancer my mom had was ovarian, with mets everywhere, and she recommended I get tested for the gene that increases risks. I just kind of nodded in shock. I signed the papers to take my mom off all medical support shortly after she left. Once my brother and asshole got there, the nurse took all the machines and lines off, and I held her hands as they gave her meds to make her comfortable. My mother died October 31st at 10:07 in the morning. My whole world fell off its axis. I was now the caretaker of my family, and I had to figure out how to be her. I got things as situated as I could in the 3 days I could stay, arranged her cremation as she wanted, and ended up paying for it because the asshole left her life insurance lapse. I grieved the loss of my mother heavily and had to scramble to take care of my brother and asshole. To say I was stressed and busy was an understatement. I put the oncologist warning out in my head. Until almost 2 years later when I had pain in my abdomen. Then suddenly her warning popped in my head. I had blood work done and found out I do carry that gene that increases my cancer risk. Right as my own doctor finds a mass on my ovary. Cue world shift again. My doctor immediately orders more scans and schedules me for surgery rather than do a biopsy and wait. I'm on board with this idea, so I went in for surgery December of last year. My doctor found a suspicious mass on my left ovary. He removed both ovaries, both tubes, and mass. The biopsy on the mass actually came back benign, but on my other ovary, the one with no visible mass, they found stage 1 cancer. I had ovarian cancer and had no idea. By doing the surgery, the surgeon actually caught it early. If my mother had not died of ovarian cancer and her doctor told me to get genetically tested, I would not have known I had it until it was too late. Ovarian cancer spreads quickly, and usually by the time it's found, like my mother, it's too late. My blood test result pushed my doctor to do more than biopsy, and removing both ovaries, he caught the real threat. My mother's death saved my life, along with the BRCA gene test. I cannot stress enough that everyone should get that test to find out your cancer risks. Knowledge is power, especially in healthcare. I have sent my mother's oncologist flowers every year on her birthday and Halloween.
"'Twas the night before Coronamas." Some background information. This I wrote earlier for fun, and there is definitely some poetry sins in there, but I thought it was amusing enough to share. I wrote this for a bunch of my friends and coworkers who are all doing a Secret Santa thing to perk up each other's spirits due to COVID. Coronamas seemed like an appropriate name. 'Twas the night before Coronamas, and all through the streets not a creature was stirring, no tossing of sheets. All children were tucked snugly in bed, a Disney-themed mask wrapped around their heads. When all of a sudden there arose such a ruckus. I had just fallen asleep. This shit is bupkis. I stumbled down the stairs, half in my robe, to find a knock at my door. I walked through the cove. Peering through the eye-hole, there was a brown-clad man, UPS on his chest and a name tag that said Stan. I opened with a groan and yelled, "Man, it's 3 a.m. What the hell, Stan?" He looked sheepish to apologize. Package in hand, "This fell in my truck earlier. I hope you understand." I tore the box from his grasp and slammed the door, thinking how you'll never use that service no more. Looking at the label, however, a smile crossed your face. Your friends had remembered Coronamas, and with not a moment to waste, you slid open the box and tossed the peanuts with glee. What did they send to you? You couldn't wait to see. You smiled at the thoughtfulness, book held aloft in hand. You carried it upstairs, and on the bed, softly do you land. Nightlight is on, sleep gone from your eyes. You spent the night reading from your pleasant surprise. Happy Coronamas, everyone, and to all a good night.